Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto is a prodigy like Tobirama. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Legend of the Kyuubi and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Prologue. Hanahagakure no Sato. A few days after the Kyuubi incident. Konoha, strongest of the Great Five, was facing a dilemma. Like any other village or settlement, Konoha was far from perfect, having its shares of ups and downs. Financial crisis, loss of manpower, civil war, espionage, etc. In Konoha's case it was simple. What am I going to do with you, Naruto? Hiruzen sighed as he gently stroked the sleeping newborn's head. The past few days had been rather hectic to say the least. The last thing the veteran ninja needed was a crying baby to take care of at the moment. Several members from both the civilian and ninja council want him gone, Kaharu, Hiruzen's old teammate answered as she went through some scrolls and files. Let them bark and froth all they want. The civilian and ninja council can only advise the Hokage, they have no power of authority over this matter, Hiruzen added as a matter of fact. The woman merely scoffed at the weak argument, never taking her eyes off the pieces of paper in front of her. You and I both know Tobirama-sensei made laws that can overrule you if they have the backing of Hai no Kuni's daimyo. Not to mention that Konoha's currently emotionally ardent don't care about those laws, Hiruzen frowned but had no choice but to acknowledge her words. Hiruzen and Minato had faith in the village populace who had proven themselves during such turbulent times. But the Sandame's faith had taken a severe hit when many began calling for the newborn's life. He could only trust a select few now. Naruto was under his care until further notice as a result. All they care about is vengeance, Kaharu continued and looked her old teammate in the eye. You of all people know what revenge-filled people are capable of. Hiruzen once again had to acknowledge that it was true on both cases. While the Hokage and daimyo of Hai no Kuni had an agreement of sorts, one that dated back to the founding days of Konoha, the daimyo was the absolute ruler of the country and anyone in it, not the Hokage. Whenever a village was to be founded, permission from the daimyo was needed. Whenever a declaration of war occurred, the backing of the daimyo was always sought usually. Virtually everything revolved around the daimyo. Luckily, the current daimyo of Hai no Kuni was a friend of Hiruzen that date back during his tutelage under Tobirama. The leader of the Land of Fire trusted him in making these types of decisions whenever they occurred. The other country's daimyo weren't as generous. Unfortunately, despite their friendship, the current daimyo wasn't without his flaws. He was tad fickle and indecisive at times and could be easily swayed in his decisions through biased as well as external influences, mainly his advisors or those who put money in their pockets. When certain situations called for fast important decisions, he made his advisors do the work. When an argument that thoroughly convinced him the most was declared the winner, the daimyo would then side with him. While the daimyo allowed Konoha's ninja and Hokage free reign in his lands, anything the Hokage or other village rulers did that ended up slandering his name or ended badly for the people of Hai no Kuni that could cause either an international or civil turmoil was dealt with harsh consequences. If it became known that he let Orochimaru go scot-free during their last confrontation, friend or not, Hiruzen was certain that the daimyo would be forced to have had him step down as Hokage, and that was the best case scenario. At worst, he could be incarcerated or even executed due to the amount of people in the elemental countries that ended up suffering by Orochimaru's hands. It was one of the many things that kept Hiruzen up at night. Case in point, it didn't stop some of them from leaking out what was supposed to be a highly classified piece of information. And we both know that it's not just civilians who want him gone. Konoha doesn't even know the boy's name or what he looks like. Many simply don't care, all they want is restitution and retribution. Even with your laws, our control and the stability of Konoha's masses are still in disarray. Kaharu further added. Yes, but those who broke them and paid with their lives showed them we don't tolerate insubordination. They'll be much more hesitant to try anything, Hamura defended his old teammate. Though even he knew it was a weak argument. Enough. Hiruzen put an end to the argument before it got out of hand, unfortunate as it is it had to be done. Also, I'm not fully reinstated yet and many will try to delay me long enough to find some form of loophole just so they can get to the boy. Though it was a necessary evil, as many like to call it, politics was a fickle and twisted game that Hiruzen hated playing most of the time. Sometimes he wondered why a ruling council was ever created in the first place and why his former mentor, Tobirama, was so adamant about them along with certain rules. As Danzo would say, the man was a custodian of political and legislative integrity, the epitome of a true ninja, unlike his older brother. To Hiruzen. However, affairs like these should remain shinobi affairs. If only it were that simple. Our focus should be on Naruto at the moment, Hiruzen pointed their attention to the babe. I thought you planned on sending him to the orphanage. He'll be safe there. Especially when you remember who's running it now. Hiruzen merely looked contemplative as he listened to his advisors. It was true that being in the orphanage run by none other than a former Anbu operative and captain of the combat medic division, especially one known as the Wandering Maiko, one of Konoha's bests, did offer a certain degree of guaranteed safety. That was my initial intent, however. Nam-chan hasn't been active for a few years, and after the recent event she and the orphan caretakers will have their hands full, Hiruzen explained. The guaranteed safety wasn't as great as initially thought. Though Hiruzen knew he may have no choice in the end. But their forces stretched thin as it was with a loss of over 3,000 active ninja, almost triple that if counting their recent losses from the war, not to mention them burning the midnight oil for the next few months. He couldn't spare or trust someone else to look after Naruto. I thought of asking Yuhi Shinku, being Konoha's Jonin commander, the boy would have been properly raised under him, but he passed away a few hours ago from his wounds, and his daughter Kurenai isn't taking it too well at the moment. I have no doubt that Fugaku's wife Mikoto wouldn't be against adopting the boy. The official story told to the council was that the Yondame's wife had gone into labor sometime during the Kyuubi attack, and both she and the baby had been hiding in a building outside Konoha. Unfortunately, the newborn had been crushed to death when one of the beast's swinging tails caused part of the building to collapse. The Haru doubted that Mikoto was ignorant or gullible enough to believe the lie they concocted. She was one of the more gifted kunoichi of her time for a reason. Being best friends with Kushina and being one of the very rare few who knew of her special condition also helped. Impossible, in a heartbeat Hiruzen would have loved nothing more than to let a friend of Kushina's adopt Naruto. With the clan being suspected of foul play in this whole debacle, the last thing we need is for the people of Konoha to be distrustful of them even more if they have the boy. Hiruzen would have loved nothing more than to make a personal example to whoever started the rumor. The trust between the Uchiha clan and ruling body of Konoha had been shaky for decades, more so now because of the rumor. The fact that some from the Uchiha clan didn't want anything to do with the boy, some of them still practiced the old ways of their ancestors, reinforced his decision. Another negative. Now, Hiruzen, are you still going on about that? The only individuals in Konoha that ever had the ability to control one of the tailed beasts, especially the Kyuubi of all things, were Uchiha Madara and Hashirama-sama. Both are long gone, and no one from either clan inherited their ability. The entire idea was absurd when Homura thought of it. Haru, however, wasn't entirely sold on the notion. I'm not convinced. With the treatment the clans faced in the past, we don't know for sure what they are entirely capable of. Sensei always stressed us to expect the unexpected, no matter how small or far-fetched. When you take into account of their unique emotional state they suffer from, it could very well happen. By emotional state Kaharu referred to her late mentor called the curse of hatred, a state where the love an Uchiha possessed was capable of turning into something incredible, twisted and dark in the blink of an eye, should tragedy befall them. It had been a topic of conversation that Tobirama always stressed about. Hiruzen groaned as the conversation veered away from the matter at hand once more, putting a small silencing barrier around Naruto. Hiruzen began to draw their attention. Focus. His bellowing had the desired effect, and both elders looked at him once again. We have other matters to deal with first before we deal with the Uchiha. By the looks of him both Kaharu and Homura knew it wasn't a topic he was looking forward to. Hiruzen had always been one to prefer settling disputes diplomatically, though they hoped it worked. Both Homura and Kaharu had an inkling that they'd be forced into conflict. This boy has just lost his parents and was giving a huge burden few wished to have on the same night, whilst simultaneously gaining the animosity of virtually everyone in Konoha. Putting him in the orphanage isn't wise at the moment. After tonight they'll have more than enough of their share of orphans, and burdening them with the one who holds the reason for their suffering would be like pouring salt over a fresh wound. Before Kaharu and Homura could add their piece Hiruzen promptly silenced them by continuing, nor is it wise for him to be adopted by any allies of his parents. We're weak from the attack, and we've still yet to fully recover from the last war. Our enemies, no doubt even some of our allies, will see this as an opportunity to potentially strike us. Taking down the legacy of the Yellow Flash, and one of few remaining legacies of the Uzumaki clan, will be an added bonus for some. Why don't you take him in then? Homura asked his old friend. You might not like hearing this, but a Jinchuriki is an invaluable part of one of the Great Five's balance of power, and more often than not have some form of relation with the leader of their respective village. It's only a matter of time before some come to the conclusion that he's Minato-san's son. Not everyone is blind to their emotions. A good ninja knew how to deceive another. What better way to fool an audience than by pretending to sympathize with one of them? Those not clouded by their hate will start to see the similarities after a while. If you adopt him into your care, maybe change his appearance just enough to fool everyone, they'll believe he's your grandson and stay away. We're not as young and versatile as he once were a decade ago, but weren't called the Three Wise Ones for nothing. Our names and deeds bring fear to the hearts of others. Especially since you hold the current title of God of Ninja. Hiruzen was the third man and the second Konoha ninja to hold the title. Though much of what he said was a good idea, it still wasn't possible, and how pray tell can I look after him? With my reinstatement and everything that's happened I'll be too busy to properly look after him. The war only just ended, and before this nightmare occurred Minato was still burning the midnight oil. The Kyuubi incident would only make it worse, and since Hiruzen had past experience, it would be more beneficial for a previous Hokage to fill the role than nominating an inexperienced and untrained one right now. A successful village's hierarchy would groom a village leader's successor over the course of a few years. By having them experience their future duties, it also gave the current leader an idea on how well their protege would do when the time came, or if meant having to reconsider their choice. It wasn't always the case, as Hiruzen had been chosen at the last minute during the First Shinobi World War, and his training to become Hokage had been minimal to non-existent. At the time, Hiruzen was the leader of the Sarutobi clan, and as the heir had been trained, but running a clan, well difficult and arduous, to running one of the Great Five during times of war paled by comparison. Why not have Asuma help out? Kaher regretted asking when she saw Hiruzen's face. Ever since Bawako's death Asuma's been distant, more so than usual. He's thrown himself into his training like many of his generation. They feel betrayed and hurt that they weren't allowed to help. Hiruzen lamented the fact that he and his youngest son weren't as close as he would have liked. Growing up during warring times coupled with his responsibilities as both Hokage and clan head, Hiruzen had been hard and stern on both his sons to make sure they survived. Asuma didn't take it in stride at times. "What about your eldest son?" Hamura added. "I can't ask him. This event really shook him and his wife. After things have settled down the two are planning to start a family. I can't burden them with this, it wasn't an option." As he thought of his eldest son, whose resemblance to Hiruzen's father was frightening, something else came to his mind. Hiruzen cursed that he had been unable to complete the training for Sage Mode with the monkeys like his father before him. It was one of the reasons why Sarutobi Sasuke was a renowned and legendary powerful ninja of his era like Madara and Hashirama, though to a lesser extent. Having Sage Mode probably could have changed the outcome of the Kyuubi incident. Perhaps Minato and Kushina would have survived while he perished instead. Once again, due to the turbulent times, as well as being Hokage, Hiruzen had little to no time to complete the training. Now that he was older his body was no longer capable of properly utilizing Sage Mode without a large amount of risks being involved. It was one of the many reasons why the training to become a sage was done at a young age. The body could withstand and adapt to the stress much more easily. Not to mention his chakra levels were nowhere near as high in his prime, another requirement for Sage Mode. "Don't I get a say in this?" A voice rung out suddenly, though none of the veteran ninja in the room seemed startled, in fact they looked quite relieved yet somewhat annoyed at the same time. "You always were one for theatrics, Jiraiya," Hiruzen smirked as his student became visible. The man's talent when it came to stealth-based ninjutsu both astonished and frightened him. Then again it was no surprise given his perverted nature. He wasn't called the village madness of Konoha in his childhood for nothing. "You damn well know it," Jiraiya's grin faltered for a moment when he laid eyes upon his godson. "So it's true. Minato and Kushina are dead." Regrettably so, the thought always made the mood that much sour. Hiruzen could tell his wayward student was in pain, Minato being like a son to him. It was basically a parent burying a child. The old lingered and suffered while the young perished too unexpectedly. "How's Kakashi taking it?" Jiraiya wondered how Minato's only surviving student was handling all this. Jiraiya had gotten to know him through Minato, it was how he found out the boy had a pretty tough life, especially when it came to the death of those closest to him. First was his father, who committed seppuku, then his fellow teammates were killed during the last war, one of them by his own hands, and now he had lost Minato to the Kyuubi. Thinking of Tsukumo, Jiraiya thought it was a damn shame really. Hiruzen had originally wanted Tsukumo to become his successor. The man was a powerful and prodigious ninja after all, one that surpassed any of his students. Though he didn't state it, even Orochimaru knew it was true and respected the man's power. Nothing as serious as Tsukumo's state of mind was, thankfully. However, Kakashi's asked for a transfer into the Anbu when he was told he couldn't take care of Naruto, Hiruzen informed him. Thinking about it though it was still pretty damn close to suicide. Over 60% of the Anbu members didn't make it past their first year. Most dying on the missions they undertook or the intense training requirements became too much and they resigned. Tobirama had formed the Anbu with the intent that only the best of the best were allowed to join. The elite guard of Konoha that undertook missions no one were allowed to know about or had the stomach to pull them off. Even then it sometimes became too much and some were forced to resign. Though Kakashi informed him he had no intention of dying, only getting stronger to protect his teacher's legacy. "I wouldn't worry about it," Jiraiya waved it off, "I've seen the kid a few times and I can honestly say that Kakashi's got enough guts and determination in him to make it through. Besides, it's best he keeps his mind focused on something else rather than Minato's death." "You're awfully calm about this, Jiraiya," Kaharu noted. Though he looked calm, Hiruzen knew otherwise. Like Kakashi, the man before him was devastated but didn't show it. Minato had been like a son to him, and his passing wasn't going to be easy to get over. Don't get me wrong, I'd love nothing more than to take a page out of Tsunade's books and go to the nearest bar. Despite Jiraiya's look, Hiruzen saw the crack in the man's mask, but now's not the time to mourn. We need to prepare. Jiraiya's tone gained their immediate attention. What is it? Hiruzen knew immediately something was amiss and cursed their luck on the unfortunate timing of it all. Just before this began, I followed a rumor. Orochimaru's up to something. From what I heard, the snake was approached by some very furtive organization, and any organization that's welcoming him with open arms after what he's done can't be good. Then there's Iwa and Kumo, they're planning something maybe. They know already, Kaharu muttered with concern. As they were, Konoha stood little chance against the combined might of both Kumo and Iwa, despite their own losses, and the two not liking one another. She knew they joined forces in a heartbeat to get rid of Konoha. With Iwa, they knew it would most likely be due to a personal vendetta against Minato more than anything. The man did after all annihilate a little over half of their active forces that fought in the front lines of the last war, thanks to his use of the Hiraishin. With Kumo, it would be more about capitalizing on their weakened state to obtain more power. It was always about being top dog for them. I can't say anything yet. Jiraiya's hated not knowing about potential plans. For all I know, they could be bluffing. What I do know is that they're potentially up to something. My spy network is working overtime to instill them with false rumors and see if there's truth to the buzz going around, but be prepared anyway. Though it wasn't much, Hiruzen was still grateful for whatever piece of information. Thank you, Jiraiya. Though he didn't like it, Hiruzen knew that he'd have no choice but to amend for his mistake when he last confronted his student. Whispers from foreign travelers and merchants had begun to spread about him. Whether they were true or not was irrelevant, none of them were good. Hiruzen had no doubt they were true. The fact that this unknown organization had approached one of Konoha's most finest and one of its most powerful ninja set off alarms in his mind. No prob, Jiraiya decided to direct his attention Naruto's way. So what's this you have planned for my godson? Godson? Both Homura and Kaharu nearly exclaimed at that tidbit of information. Yup. I'm his one and only godfather, Jiraiya beamed and boasted with utmost pride before his demeanor changed. But as much as I want to, godfather or not, I can't take care of the kid. With Tsukumo gone, I'm the only one capable of running our spy network at the moment, and it's going to be a full-time job if we want to keep our enemies from breathing down our necks. Then there's the snake and this organization. Though he accepted his reason, Hiruzen had hoped it wouldn't end like this, but it seemed like there was no choice. What he said was true, with Tsukumo dead. Jiraiya was their best and only spy master. Others were probably gifted, but they were either too few and unknown, and Hiruzen didn't know whom to trust with such a responsibility. Then it seems, once things have simmered down, Naruto will have to be placed in the orphanage. Hiruzen sighed. Elsewhere. Undisclosed location. Then it seems, once things have simmered down, Naruto will have to be placed in the orphanage. The device repeated itself. Hiruzen, you fool. A shadowed silhouette could only shake his head in disappointment. Once again, for the good of Konoha, I will have to intervene once again. With a gesture of his hand, the individual waited until a kneeling figure appeared before him. Operative 473 awaiting your orders, Danzo-sama, the operative said. Danzo merely rose from his seat and walked over to the ninja. As of now, Rude is initiating phase 1 of the Legacy Initiative. Though trained not to show emotion or question his motives, the operative couldn't help himself or herself. So soon, Danzo-sama. Though his face was impassive, Danzo mentally frowned and performed another hand gesture. A moment later, another operative in the same kneeling positive appeared and repeated almost the exact same phrase. Operative 390 awaiting your orders, Danzo-sama, a more feminine-oriented voice, came from the ninja. Phase 1 of the Legacy Initiative is now in effect. Tell the rest, he told her before he looked at the other ninja. Take Operative 473 for reconditioning, he ordered. Hi, Danzo-sama. Unlike the previous ninja, this one didn't question Danzo's command. Grabbing onto his arm, both operatives disappeared in a whirl of dust and leaves. Moving to the door, Danzo spotted the picture of the founder of Root and the Konoha Anbu out of the corner of his eye and remembered one of the last words of advice his master had given him. We've all done things we aren't proud of. Things that many will hate us for. I know I certainly have. But I'd gladly shoulder that hate and willingly sacrifice my life if it meant the safety of those I care about. A true ninja can endure anything, even being hated by the whole damn world. So long as the next generation learns from our mistakes, so long as they keep improving, it will be worth it. Thinking on those words, Danzo could only think about how disappointed Tobirama would be with the current generation. Despite how many saw him, Tobirama was a ruthless and unforgiving ninja, a stark contrast to his optimistic older brother. To the public, Senju Tobirama was a lovable leader, but to those who knew him personally, the man was known as a pragmatic and ambivalent individual, which had earned him the love and respect as well as the hate and loathing of both enemy and ally alike. The man had been an unswayable maverick of the highest degree. The man had been of the opinion that it was the duty of the next generation to surpass the previous one, and that was only accomplished when both teacher and student gave it their all. The only problem was that Konoha's current set of soldiers didn't understand or endure hardships as well as the old ones did. They had become placated during the times of peace that followed after the end of the era of warring states. After the Kyuubi incident, many had peace. Peace amongst ninja is nothing more than a lie. A fabrication and hopeful desire that only the foolish and ignorant delude themselves into believing. Sadly, my brother is one of them, but then again, I was always the smart one. The man had been half serious and half jesting at the end. It had been another of Tobirama's lessons that Danzo had taken to heart. Peace was a dream. Nothing more. The only thing that came close to peace among ninja were ceasefires and alliances, and even then they were nothing more than mere illusions that blinded those foolish enough into falling for them. But Danzo knew better. Just like he knew that if Konoha were to thrive in the near future, he would have to permanently stain his soul black by performing something even he hoped never came to pass. Were he still that naive youth that hesitated to sacrifice himself against the Kinkaku forces so many decades ago because of the risk and moral ramifications implied, he doubted he'd have been able to do it. But Danzo was a seasoned veteran. He was a man who had led and ordered black ops many would deem so heinous that even the most hardened of Anbu would be hard-pressed to go through with them. Danzo knew that he pulled this off, nothing would ever be the same. But was like Tobirama said, in order for a better world to come forth, sometimes you need to burn the old one. If they're strong enough, life will spring forth from the ashes. One night later. After he was told that Hiruzen had finished up for the night with Kaharu and Homura, Danzo began the first phase of his plan. Fortune smiled upon him over the years as several of his root agents had infiltrated the ranks of Konoha's ordinary Anbu, which allowed him easy access to the room that held a multitude of scrolls and documents. Before the man known as the Darkness of the Shinobi was a pedestal that held Konoha's coveted scroll of seals. Looking at it, Danzo released a rare chuckle at the humor of it all. Truthfully, the scroll before him wasn't the scroll of seals. Known only to him and perhaps those higher up in Konoha's chain of command, the large scroll on display was nothing more than a decoy. A true ninja worth their salt would realize that a village wouldn't blatantly leave such a powerful tool in such a manner. It was just common sense. Assuming the Anbu weren't doing their jobs, a child would be capable of taking it. Though decoy or not, stealing it was still a crime. While the decoy did have some techniques in it such as the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu and its Kenjutsu variant, the Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, no other noteworthy techniques one couldn't find or learn from anyone else, was written into the rolled up parchment. It did, however, have a particularly nasty surprise hidden within it. Putting that though aside, Danzo placed his hand on the wall of the room behind the scroll and began releasing a small pulse of chakra in a manner similar to Morse code. The action revealed an intricate seal that made the wall shimmer and warp to reveal the true scroll of seals. Space-time ninjutsu, Tobirama-san always said they were the best of safes. It was true. Personal space-time dimensions were only accessible to the originator of the techniques or those who knew the right sequence, or key as it were, to enter said dimension. Danzo wasn't a practitioner of space-time manipulation like Tobirama or Minato, nor did he allegedly know 1,000 techniques like his rival, but the man wasn't ignorant on the subject. Grabbing the scroll, Danzo began to feel a bit nostalgic. The last time he held it had been when he put in a few of his own techniques that Tobirama had deemed too dangerous for the public to know. Well, the public had been told that the scroll held many of the prized techniques of the past Hokages and other noteworthy ninja, which was true in some regards. In truth, the true scroll of seals held the village's most dangerous and darkest techniques. The scroll held many controversial and forbidden techniques, most of which belonged to Senju Tobirama, the man justifying their creation by saying, better to have them and not need them than to not have them and need them. A philosophy he and Tobirama had shared. To think it would come to this, Danzo frowned before pushing such thoughts aside. The man wasn't second-guessing himself, but a tiny part of him couldn't believe he'd be forced to do this. Going through the scroll's contents quickly, Danzo nicked his finger to draw some blood and then pressed the digit against certain characters on the scroll. When he was done, the blood that once covered the characters disappeared just as the characters danced out of the scroll and formed a complex seal array on the wall. With part of phase 1 now complete, Danzo rolled up the scroll and placed it back into its hiding place as it shimmered out of existence once more. The man few knew to be Tobirama's apprentice soon began a sequence of unique hand seals, and as soon as he finished did the seal array glow brightly before room was illuminated by a blinding flash of light. When it subsided, Danzo was nowhere to be seen in the room. Somewhere in an unknown location. Arriving in a brilliant display of light similar to how he disappeared, Danzo opened his eyes and nodded. He was in the right place. Lighting a nearby candlestick that he used to light the nearby lamps and lanterns, the once darkened space now revealed much. Dust covered much of the room, like mud on a pig. The room was of decent size, similar to that of a small but comfortable apartment, enough that it allowed the placement of a futon bed, as well as a desk and a drawer, which was covered with books and various scrolls, and various wall-mounted weaponry. To his left was a door that led outside, where he was greeted with the sight of a traditional forge, surrounded by rusted weaponry, tools, materials, and pieces of armor used during Konoha's founding years. "But I'd see your home away from home once more, master," Danzo muttered as he looked around. Though it was his first time being here alone, that is without a doubt he remembered that it was indeed the personal hideout of Senju Tobirama. As much as he knew, only he and Hashirama, and perhaps Hiruzen, were aware of the hideout's existence. The exact location was another story altogether, having only really seen the inside, but Danzo ventured a guess that he was perhaps situated or near the mountains of Hai no Kuni, judging by the rugged terrain and rocky paths visible to him. It was still night, so he couldn't make a proper assessment. Time to begin, steeling his resolve, banishing the weak youth that lingered within the edges of his souls. Danzo took out a black scroll from a hidden compartment and began what was most likely unlocking his personal room in hell. His descent having begun many years ago. Two things played an important role in the life of a ninja. Secrecy and deceit. Without these two aspects, one could not begin to comprehend the ninja way of life. They were some of the few things Danzo and Hiruzen had in common. Both of them practiced them well, too. Contrary to his image in the general populace's eye as a grandfatherly individual and pacifist that sought peace whenever available, Danzo had long ago acknowledged that Hiruzen hadn't been made Hokage for nothing. True, he sought peace perhaps out of misguided attempt to live up to Hashirama's standards. Not only because of the unnecessary bloodshed conflicts caused, in most cases, but also because he didn't wish the younger generation to go through the same ordeals they went through as children. However, Hiruzen was by no means a pushover. During his youth, whenever someone crossed him or Konoha, Hiruzen made sure that retribution was dealt with in one way or another. Whenever war threatened to break out, Hiruzen gave no quarter. No one attacked his family and got away with it. Unfortunately, there were those times where one needed to grin and bear it, and as the years went by, Danzo had since suspected that Hiruzen had become too placated in keeping the peace, rather than take action against those who wronged Konoha. Finishing up what was required, the room suddenly filled with a cloud of white smoke and Danzo prepared himself even more for what was to come next. 5 days later in Konoha. Hiruzen frowned as the two councils before him bantered back and forth like schoolyard children. If he were being honest, Hiruzen would rather be dealing with children. Children could at least be reasoned with in his opinion. True to form, someone had gone to the daimyo and informed him of Konoha's predicament. Aid was being sent, but in addition to that, an order to deal with the unrest revolving around Naruto, despite explaining his intention on placing the boy in the orphanage, had also been issued. The daimyo had stressed that if Hiruzen didn't get his village under control, then the Lord of the Land of Fire would personally become involved should the matter look like it would lead to civil unrest. And he'd also be forced to reconsider Hiruzen's reinstatement. The last thing the man wanted was the loss of his strongest hidden village under poor leadership. The end of one of the great 5 hidden villages would not only result in a power vacuum, but would also weaken Hai no Kuni as a whole, with the loss of one of the land's largest sources of income. Unfortunately, this presented them with a dilemma that wasted many hours of valuable time. The councils were equally divided on the issue. On the upside, it gave him more time to resolve the matter, though this also benefited the opposing side, too. While divided, several key members weren't present due matters drawing their attention away or due to being deceased, and no replacement have since come forth. Most of the missing seats were on the civilian council side, ironically, though the shinobi half were missing their fair share. As Konoha was currently in a state of emergency, the normal voting process for that was what it came down to was forgone for the time being. Hiruzen, it's time, Kaharu informed her old teammate. Hiruzen wanted to sigh but nodded instead. Better to get it over and done with and then move on to the next matter. Council members, it is time to cast your votes, Hiruzen announced. As that took place, Hiruzen realized that there were a few new faces amongst both councils. It seems some have finally chosen a representative, Hiruzen informed Homura. About time, the man muttered. Hopefully they'll listen to reason. From the sound of his tone, Hiruzen knew his old teammate had his doubts. So did he. Idly did Hiruzen wonder where Danzo was in all this, given it was a matter of village security. The thought worried him. Danzo had almost been stripped of his voting privileges and seat on the Elder Council years ago when he went behind Hiruzen's back when he learned of certain unsanctioned black ops. Had those black ops not benefited the village in the long run, the matter would have been different. But Hiruzen had kept a close eye on Danzo as much as possible ever since. Now Danzo had gone quiet. Hiruzen hoped it was merely because he was trying to ensure Konoha's safety in such turbulent times, but the veteran ninja couldn't help but be worried nonetheless. Danzo's actions had always been hard to predict at times. Not good, he heard Koharu mutter. Even with Choza elsewhere and none of the other representatives being chosen yet, we'll be forced to vote again by the looks of things. If Danzo were here we'd at least lead by one. Now was one of the rare times Hiruzen needed his old rival to make an appearance on village matters. That's 10 against and 10 for, Hokage-sama, Abiram Shibi declared. Hiruzen frowned and suppressed the urge to release killing intent on those ignorant fools. Years of practice forced the urge down, and Hiruzen would have to come up with another way to placate them. Konoha wasn't a democracy per se, as the Hokage had the ultimate ruling, but as things were now, Hiruzen couldn't exactly ignore the input of his councils either. The last thing he wanted was to be seen as a tyrant, and the last thing Konoha needed was to be divided when others were looking for an opening. Make that 12 against 10, Shibi Dono, a voice from down below suddenly called out. Hiruzen didn't know whether to punch or gift the man with his own personal stash of high-end sake. You're late, Danzo-sama. Regardless of your position, the votes have already been carried out. And despite your position, you seem to forget yourself, Danzo countered with a cold look. Were this meeting over, my input would have no say. But it's not, isn't it? Regardless, no winner has been declared, so another vote must occur either way. Enough of this. The vote is over. Rid us of that creature and be done with it. Kill it. Kill and be rid of it once and for all. What is the matter with you all? How can you defend that creature? Hiruzen was about to interfere when the room suddenly shook. The walls cracked and split like raging rivers. Many ninja and civilian alike buckled under the sheer intensity of the might that dominated the room, while many more fell into the realm of nightmares. Hiruzen was a veteran of 3 great wars and many smaller ones, and during that time he had faced foes that had even the strongest of ninja contemplate suicide. Their killing intent didn't come close to being compared to what was currently being felt. As quickly as it washed over them did the oppressing intensity vanish, but the after effects lingered nonetheless. What in the name of Kami was that, Yamanaka Inoichi managed to say. The man was shaking like a leaf in the wind, and his former teammate Shikaku mimicked the Yamanaka clan head. Danzo gave him the answer with 3 simple words, the other voter. The entire council listened as steps from the entrance were heard, and Hiruzen would vividly remember the sound of each individual step in the years to come the moment the figure became visible to all. The man remained impassive, but his gaze fell upon Hiruzen and said Hokage felt ready to faint. You've gotten old, Seru, the man said as a matter of fact. Many eyes widened, and Hiruzen swore he and his teammate simultaneously went into cardiac arrest the moment they saw him. Of all the people that came to mind, he was furthest from the list. And for the first time in a very long time, Hiruzen was lost for words. How could he not be? Before them, living and breathing and looking as though time had forgotten him, was Konoha's Nidaime Hokage. Senju Tobirama. Chapter 1. Back in office. Tobirama's sudden arrival and spontaneous return from the realm of the dead had forced the council session to come to an abrupt end, at least until the matter was sorted out. For Hiruzen and his former teammates, it was a matter of conflicting emotions. Hiruzen knew that Koharu and Homura tended to favor Danzo's side when it came to certain matters, and the Sandaime Hokage believed that was due to the fact that Hiruzen had left Team Tobirama to apprentice under Hashirama, while Danzo apprenticed under Tobirama. Hiruzen and his former teammates had developed a friendship during their time together. However, there was no denying that even in his youth, he had always been an optimist and a bit of a head in the clouds romantic like Hashirama. The other 4, on the other hand, had and still were much more down to earth and had a realistic view of the world and leaned more so towards the pragmatic side of decision-making. That being said, Koharu was the first to voice her displeasure of the current predicament. How dare you? The woman practically snarled at Danzo. The intensity of how she felt was so foreign to Hiruzen that he had no idea how to react. Out of all 3 of them, despite Homura's own virtue of being level-headed, Koharu had always been the one with a tight rein on her emotions. Hiruzen wasn't surprised that Danzo remained calm regardless of the threat. Despite being taught by a master ninja of the highest caliber and one of the strongest in recorded history, in terms of combat, neither Homura nor Koharu were exceptionally noteworthy shinobi. They were average jonin level ninja at best. Hiruzen acknowledged that Danzo was more than capable of handling the 2 of them by himself. At least in the open field was that the case. Both of them were incredibly effective in hit-and-run tactics, subterfuge, along with traps and detection. They were strategically sound battle commanders and more than once had their strategies help turn the tide of battles. Their true strengths, however, were more on the sidelines that helped make the village great, the administrative aspect that resulted in an incredible economy, than in actual combat. Their incredible level-headedness also made them tolerant to emotionally charged situations, too. Except for this one. I can understand your desire to protect Konoha, Danzo, but for you to have used that technique on our mentor of all people, here she had risen from her seat and hate clung to her like a second skin, what possible reason could have possessed you into doing this? And not have us consider your execution. Homura added, as he himself shook with anger, and Hiruzen knew him well enough that it took all of Homura's willpower in restraining himself from doing anything drastic. Hiruzen himself was the same. The gate was a critical condition, and the wrong word would be all it took for hell to come stampeding through. Because I ordered him to, Tobirama's voice spoke for the first time since the meeting disbanded. Sensei? Hiruzen asked. Danzo followed my orders when he took over route. Truthfully, I had hoped this wouldn't come to pass, but circumstances forced his hands. Hiruzen, the Sandaime became as rigid as a board. Tobirama had always been strict on protocol and had been a hard man to read even by those closest to him. Hiruzen, however, had been quick to pick up on certain quirks here and there during his time as the man's student. Much like a child being reprimanded by their parent, Hiruzen knew well enough that he was being scolded. And what proof do you have that this isn't him controlling you? Koharu looked far from convinced. Because those risen by the Edo Tensei do not bleed, except for Danzo, all three of them armed themselves as a kunai, materialized in their mentor's hand and watched in fascination as blood flowed freely from the man's freshly cut palm. When the wound didn't heal, as was normally expected from one affected by the Edo Tensei, all three couldn't help themselves as they were overcome with emotion even further. Furthermore, had it been the Edo Tensei, it would be highly noticeable. My skin would be cracked and my sclera black, so long as he lived. Hiruzen hoped he'd never be forced to use the Edo Tensei, but the man was familiar with the details regarding it. The mentioned features were flaws Tobirama had been unable to rectify before his death. Very well, it's not the Edo Tensei. It was clear Koharu still had lingering shreds of doubt. Hiruzen would be lying to himself if he said otherwise, too, but proof of who you claim to be is still debatable. Techniques to mask one's appearance and chakra signature have been doku. August 23, 1124, Tobirama calmly stated before she could go any further, and Koharu was finally silenced. Hiruzen, Homura, and even Danzo, though the latter didn't show it externally, bore confused looks, as none of them understood the reference. Koharu became wide-eyed and fell to her seat. Hiruzen saw the sides of her eyes beginning to water, but the woman blinked them away. 1124. I don't understand, Hiruzen asked the million Ryo question. Hiruzen, please trust me when I say he is who he says he is and leave it at that. The note of finality as well as the pleading note, he believed caught him off guard, given how much she previously fought against the notion of Tobirama's return. Hiruzen didn't push the matter. Why? Everyone looked at Homura, how? Right now, that isn't important. And it's best that few do know how I managed to cheat death. You four being the prime targets and knowing how I managed to pull it off, Hiruzen didn't have to possess superior intellect to understand the current situation. The fact that Tobirama was back would already create unwanted questions, and many more would want to learn how the man had come back from the dead for themselves. The eyes of the second son of Senju Bitsuma scanned the room and memorized every little detail, without once letting others know what he was doing. It was a skill he long since perfected since he was a young boy, and a valuable one to have. Tobirama recalled the amount of times he could have died had it not been for this exact skill. Not much had been changed since he was in office. The changes were subtle, but to a man of Tobirama's prowess, they stuck out like a badly covered facial rash. The same could be said about the hidden Anbu stationed in key positions throughout the room. Back then an Anbu's presence was like a shadow. Silent and immobile. These ones were basically torches lighting up a darkened room. But, then again, from what Danzo had informed him, Konoha was weakened and their forces too accustomed to peace to be of any real threat at the moment. It had been one of Tobirama's main concerns during the village's founding. The average skill level of shinobi during the Warring States period were either classified as elite jonin, which was 49% of them, or low-level kage, that ranged in the low 20%. Any ninja ranked lower than that were either lucky to be alive, or they were dead or dying. And that was the problem. Death. A shinobi that would not die, and a powerful one at that, was a dangerous adversary no one wanted to face. Many powerful shinobi that would not die was a thrice-damned calamity in the making. Tobirama intended for return to be a boon for Konoha, but was not ignorant to believe that his return would not be without consequences. However, contingencies had long since been planned to minimize them, and right now Tobirama needed answers. My first question before we get into official business. What happened to my clan? Tobirama's tone was cold and sharp enough that even the keenest razor would appear duller than a butter knife by comparison. The Senju clan was the most powerful clan in the world, and yet none were spotted at the meeting. Where are they? Gone, I'm sorry to say, sensei, Hiruzen told him. After Hashirama sacrificed himself to bring back the victims of that battle, and after you sacrificed yourself for us, the Senju clan slowly started to fall apart until only Tsunade remained. Tsunade's alive. The man's hard features softened at that, is she alright? The look of his students and apprentice hardened his face once more. Tsunade left the village years ago, sensei, Hiruzen spoke with a sad tone. Left? The man's face hardened even further before they morphed into one of fury. What do you mean she left? He nearly snarled. The reasons had better be good. They weren't. More like she abandoned her duty, Danzo interjected, and Tobirama watched his former apprentice ignore Hiruzen's glare. Call it what you will, Hiruzen, but that girl abandoned Konoha because she could not deal with her loss, and you were too liberal with your students. If it was possible, Tobirama's gaze became colder, and his look made Hiruzen feel like a genin once more. What happened? Tobirama's order was answered in a summarized manner. After the loss of her brother and then her lover, coupled with the loss of many friends, and then her clan, Tsunade felt her legacy, and that of the Hokage had become cursed. Not long after the Second Shinobi World War was over, she was all that remained of the Senju clan. I gave her permission to leave Konoha with her lover's niece soon after, and she hasn't been back since. Tobirama, however, interpreted the story in another manner, so, to surmise. She left because she lost her loved ones, and everything became too hard for her. Pathetic, he frowned, and while Hiruzen nearly winced, the others weren't surprised by his cold nature. Not that Tobirama himself was surprised. Both he and Hashirama were believers of the will of fire, but the Nidaime Hokage long since come to grips that he and his older brother had different opinions when it came to being ninja. Tobirama had always stressed that a true shinobi was to endure the hardships that befell them because life wasn't fair, and the life of shinobi was even more so. If one couldn't deal with it, then they weren't deemed a shinobi in his opinion. Draft a letter and order her back. I want her barred from all assets of the Senju clan until I deem fit. Stress to her that failure to return will see her banished from the clan, and should that fail, I'll find her myself and drag her back kicking and screaming. It's time that girl grew up and faced the world for what it is. Tobirama had never agreed with the logic, or lack thereof, of trying to protect children from the horrors of the world. One of the reasons why Hashirama desired the founding of Konoha was because he didn't want future generations to go through the same hardships he, his brothers, and anyone else of his generation had faced during the Warring States period. Tobirama, however, didn't see eye to eye with his brother on that. Realistically speaking, Konoha was a relatively new village, and there was no guarantee Hashirama's dream would last, even with the number of clans and resources Konoha began to accumulate. Hashirama wasn't an unintelligent man, but his optimistic nature had a bad tendency of overlooking grudges and outside factors. Tobirama did his best to ensure none took advantage of that. But, while ensuring children didn't have to go through the same horrors their predecessors had was a nice thought, the world was a cruel place in Tobirama's experience. Even the best of ninja would be chewed and spat out if the opportunity presented itself. The sooner they knew how to deal with it, the better off they would be. To others it sounded cruel, but to him that was just showed a lack of foresight on the behalf of others. Hiruzen, get me my clan's ledgers. If Tsunade took after his brother, then Tobirama could only hope the damage was salvageable. Whenever it came to Hashirama and gambling, it either resulted in enormous losses or unbelievable gains. But Tobirama didn't like to gamble unless he knew the odds were in his favor, usually by design, or if he was left with no other alternatives. If anything, he'd get what was necessary from the hidden caches scattered across the elemental countries if things looked bleak. They weren't much, but they'd be enough nonetheless. And the boy? He heard Danzo ask and saw Hiruzen frown. For now, I'll be overseeing the boy's well-being. The Senju clan captured and dealt with all 9 of the tailed beasts at one point before they were sealed inside a vessel. One tailed beast, regardless of it being the strongest of them, sealed inside a newborn, is child's play by comparison. Having had a role in raising Tsunade, which had been a handful unto itself, Tobirama could handle himself. If anything, Tobirama would use Mito's notes if a need arose. Thinking of the Biju, Tobirama couldn't help but curse his older brother once again. Despite being downright childish and stupid at times, regardless of his unrivaled might, Tobirama loved Hashirama nonetheless. However, the man had been too idealistic for his own good, and often Tobirama and Mito had to bring him back down to earth. But even then, it wasn't always enough. The Nidaime Hokage had been vehemently against selling the Biju to the other countries, and he had wanted to choke the life out of his brother for suggesting they be given away for free. It had been a short-term benefit, but ultimately detrimental long-term, as Tobirama suspected it would. Hashirama, however, was unwavering and immovable on the matter. And, in true form, Tobirama had predicted correctly, as the act later came back to haunt them by making the First Shinobi World War even worse, instead of smoothing things over. While not directly responsible, selling off the Biju had also played a role in not only Hashirama's death, but his own, too. Now Tobirama was once again left to clean up his older brother's mess. The boy is of the Uzumaki clan, yes. At Hiruzen's nod, it allowed him to continue his train of thought. Tobirama wasn't as much of a dreamer or as hopeful as his older brother, but he hoped to be wrong in this matter. Am I to assume Mito's clan fell, too? They have regrettably. Scattered to the winds would be a better way to describe it, Hiruzen explained the tale. In the end, Tobirama could only sigh. Powerful as the Uzumaki clan had been, and unequaled as their prowess in Fuinjutsu was, they were a proud and overly confident bunch who had a preference for isolation. The Uzumaki clan had been one of the very first clans invited to join Konoha, but Hashirama hadn't forced the issue when they declined for the sake of peace and their long-lasting relationship. On one end of the spectrum, Tobirama could understand their reasons. Yuzu no Kuni, though more accurately it was an archipelago, had natural and man-made defenses that made conventional invasion methods incredibly difficult. On a map it would appear smaller than it actually was, but that was mainly due to the seals long since put into place that hid its true appearance. However, one major problem was that the clan was in a very isolated area, and because of how secretive they were, despite the long-standing Senju and Uzumaki alliance, it made getting to them difficult. The man could only imagine the logistical nightmare it would be in getting necessary resources from the mainland, as there was only so much the sea could provide them, especially during wartime. Unmatched in the art, the Uzumaki had to have realized that there was only so much that Fuinjutsu could do for them. Even Mito's pleas with her father and the clan council did nothing to sway them. Tobirama didn't know if it was seals or the infamous Uzumaki stubbornness that prevented her from divulging such information, too, when asked. As wife of the man known as the strongest shinobi in the world and being no slouch herself, Futon wanted to incur their wrath. Who knows or who do you suspect knows of the boy's lineage? Tobirama asked. Other than his godfather and our resident spymaster, likely only his mother's old team. Uchiha Mikoto and Hyuga Hisashi, and my late wife. In Uzumaki, Uchiha and Hyuga, there was lethal combination. Then all the more reason for me to take him into the Senju clan as a ward, Tobirama declared. Being cousin clans, and being who he was, would leave few to contest the action. Those foolish enough to do so would only play into the man's trap. Had the man been born a Yamanaka he'd have known that this was a rare moment, one that was very seldom and in between ever since Hiruzen became the Sandaime, that both Hiruzen and Danzo agreed the idea had merit. Except for their immense chakra and vitality like their cousin clan, neither the Uzumaki or Senju had ever developed a bloodline limit that was consistently inherited. But as both bloodlines were very close due to their intermingling, wardship in this case wasn't unheard of. Taking a ward had fallen out of practice at the end of the warring states ever since the introduction of genin teams, and even then, the practice had mostly been used by the samurai clans. Wardship and marriage had been used as a way to strengthen or create alliances between clans since before ninja came into being, a ward worked and learned from their foster family and were also protected by the clan raising them. Any attack on said ward was seen as an attack on the parent and foster clans. Wards, and, as the first and second sons were the heirs of the clan, the third, fourth, and fifth sons could be adopted by their foster clans and take on the foster clan's name. Some even became head of that clan if no suitable heir, or any heir for that matter, was available. While this was much less common with the more powerful clans or those with hereditary bloodline limits, members of the Senju and Uzumaki clans had commonly married one or the other to the point that Tobirama wouldn't doubt the boy to be a third or fourth cousin. The ward under his protection meant only the truly stupid or arrogant would put little thought into harming Naruto. After all, Tobirama was a master ninja of the strongest clan. His might had only ever been outmatched by Hashirama and Madara during his time, and his cause of death had been at the hands of two pseudo-Jinchuriki, who were low-level cages, using the Sage of the Six Paths treasured tools, and a squadron of 20 elite Jonin shinobi. Furthermore, Tobirama had yet to fully recover from his near-death injuries during the failed Gold and Silver Brothers incident. Even then he took them all down and died 20 minutes later from severe exhaustion and grievous wounds that would have killed lesser men the instant they received a single one. However, the returned Senju noticed Hiruzen still had some concerns. "What are you concerned about now, Hiruzen?" Tobirama asked. Hiruzen answered. "We both know you already know," Tobirama chuckled at his old student's comment. Even now he was just as concerned for another's safety. Powerful as he was, Tobirama was still only one man. The creator of the Kage Bunshin, true, but still only one man. Right now, I'm only one man. I am hopeful that Tsunade will come to her senses and focus on the here and now, and should she not he'd make good on his word. But worry not. The boy is the future of my clan and the Uzumaki. He'll be well protected. None were surprised that Naruto would be made his heir despite Tsunade being alive. While not all clans followed it, for over 3,000 years did families in the elemental countries practice different forms of patrilineal or primogeniture succession. This was done not only because men could have multiple children with different partners compared to women, but also due to the incredibly low lifespan of the time and to ensure that the bloodline could be passed on to the next generation. In addition, medical science and ninjutsu during the bloody period was nowhere as prominent as it was in today's day and age, nor as widespread. Women dying at birth had been a common occurrence. Even the Senju had followed it, though there had been female clan heads in the past from time to time, but that had been temporary until a male heir came of age or was deemed ready by the clan elders. However, sometime after the first hidden villages came into being did such traditions begin to shift, and the statistics for the number of women becoming clan heads had drastically changed when egalitarian successions became more pronounced. Senju Tobirama, however, well from another time, one where the role of Kunoichi was much different and succession was much different than now, was a calculative man. To him it was not a matter of gender, but a matter of competency. Hashirama had been a powerful ninja and charismatic, but Tobirama believed his brother had not possessed the right qualities that was required of a clan head. And, despite being his niece, Tsunade's actions left much to be desired, too. From a technical standpoint, as the last Senju until Tobirama's return, that is Tsunade was currently clan head. But with Tsunade having no child of her own that meant that it fell back to him. Back from the dead or not, Tobirama would be unable to sire any heirs of his own blood. Killing young children during the warring states had been a common occurrence. It took away a clan's future. During his younger years, Tobirama had been captured by a sadistic ninja after being mistaken for Hashirama. Instead of taking the life of the younger of the Senju brothers, as was the norm, the operative who had lost much at the hands of the Senju clan had irreparably crippled his ability to have heirs. Fortunately, Tobirama had managed to escape with his life and, in retaliation the man and those that hired him had become the target of the Senju clan's wrath. The end result? Extinction in an irreparably ravaged land. It had been one of the rare times that Tobirama had seen Hashirama go all out and unleash his inner demon. Which meant that Naruto, as heir to two major clans, would need all the top quality protection he could get. Unfortunately, emotions blinded even the best of ninja, and many would see it as an opportunity to strike in a misguided attempt at vengeance. Hiruzen didn't doubt Kakashi would postpone his time in Anbu to protect his mentor's son if given the chance. "Who do you have in mind?" Koharu asked. All four, Danzo included, had a chill go up their spines. No. More accurately, it was as though their spines turned into pure, hellishly cold ice. The veterans of many wars were all brought back to a time when they were nothing but wet behind the ears ninja in training. Weak. Vulnerable. Helpless. Outclassed. All four ninja only felt this way whenever Tobirama or Hashirama decided to let their sadistic side out. It was a side that few knew of, but one many could go on with forever not knowing. Whomever was foolish enough to cross their newly risen mentor would forever regret what he had planned. Despite the impossibility of it, Tobirama chuckled once again and it made their spine grow even colder. A shadow has already been called upon. I could tell you who they are, but I don't have to tell you how I like to keep my secrets close to the chest. Of that all of them could agree on. Tobirama's secrets were only ever revealed willingly. One had a better chance at killing the man than forcibly getting his secrets. However, I can promise this. You will know soon enough. As will our enemies when they show themselves. And believe me, they will do their best to ensure my clan doesn't come back from the ashes. Hiruzen wasn't exactly comforted by those words. Whomever this individual was, Tobirama wouldn't involve them unless they were competent at whatever Tobirama had in store. Time would only tell what this would mean for Konoha, too. For now, I have matters to attend to. In a week's time, we will have council once again and this time we will address certain matters. Enemies will be made, alliances likely put into question, and do I look so forward to seeing many of them squirm, Hiruzen could only sigh. His mentor often had a dark and twisted sense of humor. Are you sure that's wise? Out of all of his past students, Hiruzen had been the only one to question Tobirama's motives. It was both refreshing and annoying if Tobirama was honest. Normally, I'd say no. However, I've been away for some time, Hiruzen, and my knowledge on what has happened since my departure and what the current political status of Konoha is has no doubt changed since then. I need time to prepare my attack and parries. But most importantly, I need to ensure this boy doesn't fall into the wrong hands. A babe with a tailed beast sealed in them was a dangerous ace to lose. Spread the word. I want only your most trusted and best sent to the Senju compound when you have the chance. Even then Tobirama would be judging them himself as an additional precaution. Yes, about the Senju compound, Koharu flinched at his gaze. It hasn't been in use for quite some time and might require some maintenance here and there. Once she was done, Tobirama sighed and mentally counted to 10. Of all the bad habits Tsunade could have inherited from her grandfather, the gambling, love of money, the one thing he had hoped she didn't was how Hashirama always found a way to give him a skull-splitting migraine. Ancestors give me strength not to kill that girl, if anything he'd spank her behind black and blue. Dismissing them except for Danzo, Tobirama asked his former apprentice the biggest question that plagued his mind. How bad is it? Much of what he knew was lacking despite Danzo giving him the critical points. Danzo said nothing but gave his back from the dead mentor a look that only the man would recognize from years of association. That bad is it? Tobirama could only imagine what the damage was. Hiruzen's done much for Konoha, of that Danzo would have to give him credit. His accomplishments have him hailed as the greatest Hokage for his deeds in office during war and peacetime and for his might as a ninja. Currently, he's the strongest of the great 5 Kages, and that was no small feat when Hyumitsuno no, the immortal, had still been around. When the Sandaime Reikage died in the Third Shinobi World War, Hiruzen's might as the strongest of the great 5 Kages had become pretty much uncontested. But he takes too much after my brother, doesn't he? Danzo once more only gave his mentor a look. I can see why I was brought back. A slight part of Tobirama wanted Danzo to be proven wrong, but knew his apprentice wouldn't have going through with their plan over something so trifle. Tobirama had nothing against the philosophy known as the will of fire. He was a believer in it too. Not so much like his brother, but still a firm believer in his own way. However, the problem was that when many began putting too much stock into a belief, they often became clouded and forgot the realities of the world. They began to see the world as to how they want to see it, not as it is. It was a flaw Hashirama had, and it would appear it had been passed on to Hiruzen and perhaps even the current generation. The damage from the demon fox was extensive, and the village had also only just come out of a war. Konoha needed a firm hand and needed to be seen as strong, a message needed to be sent. The will of fire would inspire and motivate others, but it wouldn't keep the wolves at bay or put food on a family's table. Ninja were loyal to a village if the village appeared to be loyal to them. The village made one feel safe, offered protection, and gave them an income that allowed them access to basic needs and desires. Part of the will of fire was that a ninja of Konoha were a family and looked after the best interest of the village, not their own self-interest. Tobirama believed this too, but he wasn't a fool to believe that Konoha's clans didn't have some form of self-interest. So long as it didn't put Konoha at risk or threaten the village as a whole, a bit of self-interest was tolerable. Only a fool would think self-interest could be truly dealt away with. At best, it could be managed and guided in a better direction. Right now, Tobirama's interest would be making it look like Konoha was weak and take advantage of those foolish enough to show their hands. However, that had to be reined in since the village lacked both manpower, resources, and Tobirama's knowledge of this day and age was limited. Too many variables were present for him to do such a thing, unless his goal was to weaken Konoha. What's the situation with the other Great Five? Getting an idea on how the other great villages were faring would provide insight on what could be done. The start, Tsunade no Sato has recently become our ally. Tobirama didn't know how to feel about that at the moment. Are they still the weakest of the 5? Danzo merely gave a light smirk. Tobirama had a warped sense of humor at times. Yes, albeit marginally, right now. And part of the reason why the war began was due to them. Their Sandaime Kazukiage went missing, and their efforts to locate him saw them entering another country's territories illegally. Skirmishes were already occurring, and as a result of national power in the Great 5 countries being at an all-time low due to the previous war, the smaller villages saw it as an opportunity to capitalize on. It led to another world war only a few years later. Tsunade's losses were second only to Iwa, but they lacked the resources to rebuild and feed their people as quickly as the latter. In other words, Tsunade couldn't be considered much of a threat. So, there are allies out of necessity. Really, Tobirama would have done something differently. Kei's no Kuni was rich in how poor it was. Their needs were bought from other countries in order to survive. No one invaded unless they had to, because no one really wanted the land, and only the nomad clans that had lived in Kei's no Kuni for centuries knew how to survive in those barren lands. Controlling it was a waste of time and resources in Tobirama's opinion. Kei's no Kuni shinobi, however, were another matter. They were hardened and skilled in wind techniques. Tobirama would have assimilated a portion of their forces into Hai no Kunis. Anything else? Kurigakure from the look of things is about to enter into a civil war. If it does, then they might replace Tsunade as the weakest of us. Apparently, there's a rumor in their village claiming clans with bloodline limits are the cause of the wars, Danzo stated. Truly? Tobirama thought the whole notion just plain moronic, but Kiri's poor leadership was their loss and Konoha's gain. Regrettably, their borders are closed and much of the clans worth assimilating into Konoha have started going into hiding. Danzo answered the unasked question. Pity, the man knew of a few clans of Kurigakure no Sato that would have been a welcoming addition. But Tobirama acknowledged that Kiri's borders were one of the best given its location and the stealth of their forces, coupled with the mist that surrounded the area. Getting there with the borders open was tricky enough, and to pull off what he wanted would take too much time and resources that would have ultimately been better spent elsewhere. At the same time, Kiri wasn't a threat either, but warranted some looking into for future opportunities. Iwa has suffered the most of the war when the 4th Hokage mastered your Hiraishin. Tobirama would be lying if he said he wasn't impressed. The Hiraishin was neither an easy technique to learn or use. Their forces are low, but many of them are looking to settle the score, especially Inoki since he lost 2 of his children. But then again, Inoki has had a score to settle with Konoha even before he took over the mantle, Danzo finished. Inoki? That brat was made Tsuchikage. Tobirama found that hard to believe. So currently the only threat was Iwa. Yes. And he is as headstrong as ever. As for Kumo, aside from us they are the only ones who can be seen as having gained a favorable outcome from the war. My agents believe Kumo is looking to form an alliance once everything has returned to a sense of normality, but unlike the rest of us they have not demilitarized their forces. Tobirama detected a hint of approval in Danzo's tone. Even he found the notion appealing. An alliance with Kumo? The last time Kumo tried forming an alliance with Konoha and suing for peace, it nearly ended with my death and only served to prolong the First Shinobi World War. I trust Kumo as much as I trusted Madara, the man declared calmly. So, I was right, Danzo barely batted an eye at the revelation. They never planned for peace, it hadn't been the first time a village sued for peace, but had opposite or ulterior motives. Not in the slightest. I was quick to figure out that Kumo's true attempt was getting rid of me and leave Konoha weakened or morally crippled. Their Nidaime Reikage might not have been as strong as his predecessor or myself, but the man was very cunning and well prepared. I faced both him and the Gold and Silver brothers on their terms, and even then, I managed to kill him and weaken the other 2 enough to escape, even if barely was left unsaid. Strong as he was, Tobirama was not his brother and knew his limits. Even with the Hiraishin, facing 3 cage-level shinobi on their own terms in home turf and coming out alive, even if it was near death, was a testament of the man's sheer skill as a ninja. Hashirama would have crushed them with little to no effort. But as we already know, their intention of continuing the war succeeded. Kumo's founding clan's modus operandi is doing whatever needs to be done to come out on top. And that ideal has likely been deeply ingrained into every future Reikage. From what I've read, I doubt that's changed, and shortly thereafter, Tobirama and his team had no choice but to go out into the field where he'd ultimately meet his end. I remember. Kumo spun a different tale, and by the time you were well enough to do anything many of our forces began calling you a warhawk, even more so when Tobirama declined the opportunity for a peaceful resolution. By then the general opinion of Danzo amongst Konoha ninja had begun to change as well. Years later he'd earned the same moniker. And I endured it. Let them think all they want about me, I cared not, and I still don't. So long as Konoha was safe and so long as the next generation did better than mine, I was willing to give my life for it, Tobirama informed him. Tobirama looked his old student dead in the eye as he said the following, Danzo, the reason why I didn't choose you as Hokage was simple. Konoha likely would have never allowed it. Had I lived it might have been a different story altogether. But that aside, Hiruzen was Hashirama's apprentice, and people fondly remember my older brother and his deeds, and that in turn was reflected upon Hiruzen. I, however, despite my contributions that would benefit Konoha in the long term, was seen as the ambivalent and sterner brother who committed what many would view as atrocities, and, as my apprentice, that was reflected upon you. I couldn't risk Konoha to be torn by civil war in the midst of another one. It would have ended in your death had you and Hiruzen fought, the deaths of countless others, and ended with the village Hashirama sacrificed himself for to become nothing more than rubble and corpses. Danzo didn't like hearing it from the horse's mouth, but prideful as he was, even he wouldn't deny the fact that Hiruzen was stronger than him. Well, Danzo had a unique set of skills that even Hiruzen lacked. The Sandaime Hokage's raw talent as a ninja had always been greater than his own. The only reasons why I became Hokage was because I was Hashirama's brother and viewed as the most qualified. But by the end, many began to wonder if the right choice had been made. You and I, Danzo, we're the shadow behind the seat, the knife in the dark. We perform the deeds others cannot and are viewed as monsters for it, regardless of the fact it allowed others to live comfortable and worry-free lives. Blissfully ignorant of the dangers only we know about. We are the darkness of the shinobi, the man finished. And now Konoha needs your rule once more, Danzo added. Decades have passed and many only remember the good you have done for Konoha. Unlike Hiruzen, you haven't aged a day. A Hokage, any cage of a village, was considered the strongest ninja. If they fought, Danzo could see Hiruzen losing. It wouldn't be quick or simple fight, but Hiruzen would still lose. Had he been in his prime the outcome could go either way. It helps you that during the twilight years of the war, Hiruzen had established reconciliation policies that were less than savory. Danzo didn't look it, but a slight twitch in his facial muscles, he was far from pleased. How weak did it make us look? Tobirama had already deduced the outcome. Weak enough that it prolonged the war by almost half a year, and the daimyo of the Land of Fire was pressured into having Hiruzen find a replacement once the war ended. Had the daimyo of Hai no Kuni not been Hiruzen's friend it could have been much worse. And now with this Yondaime Hokage dead they are thinking of putting him back in office. It made sense given Hiruzen was the only one who had any experience as Hokage. He was seen as the only viable option, and the daimyo is his friend. Reinstating Hiruzen would be a quicker and smoother transition than getting a new one, despite his actions not sitting well with many. Danzo was one of them. Territory that had been taken in the previous wars, such as Tsunade's small amount of fertile land, had been given back despite protest. The territory had always been a topic of debate and caused many disputes between Tsuna and Konoha. Giving it away to Tsuna and not seeking reparations from Iwa despite winning the war had been one of the main factors as to why Hiruzen was asked to step down. Tobirama would not make that same mistake. Hyuga compound. For generations, the Hyuga clan took pride in the fact that they were renowned as not only one of the longest-lasting ninja clans, but also one of the strongest and wealthiest in existence. Despite loss that occurred over the centuries, the clan was one of the rare few capable of tracing their lineage, which went back nearly 2,000 years. Even if it wasn't perfect, it was better than most clans with a similar history. Many clans before them stood at the top of the food chain for almost as long as the Hyuga, only to fall and never rise again, or become forgotten like so many others who perished during Warring States era. The Warring States period was a harsh time and often than not had two outcomes. Live or die. The tragedies and massacres that took place on a daily basis made it difficult to discern which outcome was better. But one clan's loss was another's gain, and generations of proper leadership and practice allowed the Hyuga to capitalize on such occurrences. As a result, despite none of them holding the title of Hokage, and with the loss of the Senju clan and the Uchiha slowly being on the verge of becoming a shadow of its former glory days, the Hyuga were easily the most prominent clan in Konoha. Their connections in the capital of Hai no Kuni and other elemental countries, coupled with their prowess as ninja and influence within the village, made them an invaluable asset to the strongest of the Great Five. This was especially so during such trying times. By using the resources at their disposal to aid and ease the burden, many would recall the Hyuga clan's deeds during such trying times. However, the most recent events warranted the Hyuga council to assemble once more, which had been occurring more often ever since the Kyuubi incident. This one, however, was especially crucial in Hiashi's opinion, if his father had summoned them. While the mantle of clan head had only recently been passed to Hiashi, the Hyuga had been born and raised for this role his whole life. So far, he hadn't heard even a whisper of displeasure, but even that didn't mean some were content with his rule. But that didn't stop his father, the previous clan head, from using the influence and authority he held over the clan. At 63 years of age, and having ruled the clan for nearly 50 after his mother died during the early days of the First Shinobi World War, Higashi Hyuga was counted amongst the oldest and experienced Hyuga that remained of the Warring States period. The man had led his clan through 3 great wars and several minor ones before he felt it time for another to take the lead. He had done it all with decorum and a level head, which is why many were left confused and at odds when the former head forewent protocol. Send for our best. I don't care if they belong to the branch or the main family, just send them here now. The man ordered and none dare argue. While physically past his prime, nowhere as formidable as he once was, the man was still formidable and possessed an air about him that made him look younger. Father? Hiashi could only wonder what could have had warranted such an order. The Hyuga clan had gotten off relatively easy during the Kyuubi incident compared to others, but his clan had suffered nonetheless. Higashi had volunteered to represent the Hyuga at the council meeting, while Hiashi looked after his clan. Hiashi could only wonder what had been said for him to do something out of the ordinary. We've received word that Hokage-sama requires skilled and true ninja, in other words, ninja that could be trusted and wouldn't question their Hokage's orders. This has to do with the meeting. The current patriarch's ventured guess earned him a stiff nod from his father. It does. Now, I want you all to be silent and pay attention like I expect all my clan members to. Hiashi knew his father well enough to know that he had just given them an order. It was far from a suggestion. Now, I was young, barely a boy really, when I first laid my eyes on the Senju brothers and Uchiha Madara, and to this day, I've never forgotten what they felt like. The feel of their chakra was unlike any I ever sensed or seen before. The immense and overpowering presence they exhumed, it was as though I were a pebble at the base of a mountain, a leaf a hurricane, a bubble in a bottomless ocean. The former clan leader couldn't help the involuntary shudder that came. Higashi-sama, you can't honestly be saying. Silence. The man's withering glare paralyzed the vocal cords of the one foolish enough to interrupt the former Hyuga patriarch. And I'm not saying anything. I'm telling you all here and now, and I'm only going to say this once, and it doesn't matter to me if you don't believe it, but without a shred of doubt, that man claiming to be our nickname is, in fact, Senju Tobirama. He's back. And had it been any other ninja, I'd have questioned how that was possible. When Higashi showed he was finished, many in the room began murmuring amongst themselves. If what Higashi-sama says is true, we all know what this means, correct? An elder stated. Of course, we do. We're a council. Not some undisciplined ninja in training. Another retorted, our influence is in jeopardy. The Senju clan was the strongest and most influential of the four noble clans of Konoha, and when only Tsunade-sama remained our influence grew because that woman is too haunted and broken to bring it back to its former glory. Hiashi lightly frowned at the man's comment. The current Hyuga clan head respected Tsunade for her skills as a ninja, but had found her way of coping with her loss unbecoming and disappointing. Hiashi remembered that even after losing his mother and many other fellow friends and clansmen, he was able to endure despite how unpleasant it had been. Seeing as none of them were spotted defending Konoha against the Kyuubi, whispers have already spread that the Uchiha are suspected of foul play. 2. The absence of the Konoha military police force had not gone unnoticed. This will only benefit us in the long run. The FFT. The Uchiha clan's influence has been diminishing ever since Madara abandoned Konoha. This will only accelerate it, one commented. The Hyuga clan still acknowledge the Uchiha as a formidable force, only a fool would think otherwise, but they weren't as great as they used to be. And with only 3 out of 11 Uchiha now awakening their famed Sharingan, each passing generation dwindles those numbers even further. Peacetime had benefited many, but it wasn't without cost. Conflict not being a constant and daily occurrence, and many becoming accustomed to peace made ninja less powerful and skilled than they used to be. While the next generation had surpassed the previous one in ways such as teamwork and collaboration, in terms of might and skill, it was becoming more and more evident that aspect was going on a downward spiral. The awakening of a Sharingan was different from one Uchiha to the next, but the overall basis was one undergoing a highly emotional state, which had been a daily occurrence in the Warring States era, but not so much afterwards in a time of peace. The only time where an increase occurred had been during the Great Wars, but that increase was offset by the lost lives that came with war. Our cousin clan aside, you all forget one critical factor. Tobirama-sama isn't his great niece. He possesses the drive and desire for it, Higashi added. The Nidaime Hokage may not be praised and regaled in the same light as Hashirama once was, but the man's contributions greatly benefited Konoha in the long run by comparison. Then how do you propose we deal with this? Not by unscrupulous means, Higashi quickly added, and then elaborated even further by placing a white-sheathed ceremonial dagger before him for all to see. If any of you feel that way, then take this and end your life. Better for you to end it now than allow Tobirama-sama to get his hands on you. Heed my words when I say that death will be your greatest desire, but forever out of your reach, should you make a terrible enemy out of that man. The Hyuga clan has survived and thrived for nearly 2 millennia. Even now we're still considered one of the top 5 clans that survived the Warring States period. We are currently Konoha's most influential clan because of sound leadership, and I for one will not allow that to end now. If it came to pass, it wouldn't be the first clan Tobirama eliminated. None took the dagger, but Higashi would have his son and those he could trust keep an eye out. Just because a clan was loyal to a village and its leader didn't mean everyone in that clan or village gave a damn. Ninja lied, cheat, double-crossed and performed deeds others could only imagine. Even samurai had abandoned or turned on their allies for one reason or another. Tobirama was an intelligent and pragmatic individual, but he could be highly vindictive and colder than the ice and snows of Tetsu, no kuni if crossed in a very bad way. How to go about this then? Have one of our own court him? An exercise in futility. Even though Tobirama was a second son, he should have married and had children of his own, if not for duty to his clan, given that most children from Tobirama's time often didn't make it to their adolescence. First to third sons were expected to have children of their own at an early age to ensure the clan continued on. While adoptions took place commonly within clans with secret techniques, it was a different matter to clan-specific bloodline limits. It was difficult to continue a clan when the genetic lineage that distinguished it died out. Cousin clans, however, where marriage between the two was quite common was another story. Tobirama-sama is, a man whose actions or inactions always had a reason behind them. His lack of children leads me to suspect he can't have children, Higashi explained. But it doesn't mean he can't have an heir, Hiashi concluded, and it was comments like that made Higashi swell up with pride in his firstborn. Tobirama will seek an heir. And given Tsunade Dono's actions, and as the few remaining Senju clan members have long since died out, he'll try and find a distant relative. Higashi saw others had their suspicions on who that would be. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki. You believe Tobirama-sama will take the boy under his protection? It's rather clever, really. The boy lacks the clan's common looks, but what better way to hide than in plain sight? Giving an orphan an honorary last name was not uncommon in Konoha either. Many wouldn't bat an eyelash, and many were now ignorant of the names. I doubt that's all he has planned. Higashi had never been one of the most powerful of ninja in Konoha, but even without the Byakugan he was highly observant. During his rule, Higashi noticed a subtle pattern where Tobirama's plans were never straightforward and simple as they appeared to be. His plans were multifaceted, with one plan putting another in motion. My daughter, Hiashi was heard. You plan to use Hinata, my heir, your granddaughter, to garner an alliance. Down the line, yes, in this day and ninja didn't marry for political reasons nearly as often as they did in the pre-Hidden Villages era, but it was still done nonetheless. But not now. Tobirama was not much of a fan for those who lacked subtlety. Right now, we've been given an opportunity, an opening, a stepping stone for something greater. And to make certain this opportunity isn't squandered we will be sending our best. And if they fail? Then we make our own opportunities, Higashi answered and signaled for the doors to open. Before them was a group of Hyuga and kneeling on one knee, and at the head of it was Higashi's second son, Hisashi. Sometime later. Tobirama had never been one for comical or exaggerated reactions like his older brother, he had always been the more serious of the two, but even he had his limits, and Hashirama had been at the top of the list of people who could make him lose his composure. Looking at the state of his clan compound, Tsunade now easily made it to the top 5 and believed his previously thought-out punishment too light. Having originated from Hashirama's Mokuton and reinforced with seals from their cousin clan, the enclosure, buildings and gates were still standing strong and sturdy as they had nearly 60 years ago. That didn't mean it wasn't exactly eye candy. This will require a lot of shadow clones, Tobirama had thought at the time. In addition, he also thought it would also need more than a coat of paint. More than a few areas of stonework here and there had long since began to erode and crumble from lack of maintenance. Webs from spiders, nests, birds and other creatures were present in an abundance and an eyesore to behold. The seals put in place long ago to keep such creatures would need a look over, as while they were long-lasting they weren't eternal to his knowledge. Tobirama believed a share of blame lied with Hashirama, too. Even at a young age his brother's chakra had been powerful. It was practically life, warmth and comfort all in one, and even with him long gone Tobirama's talent as a sensor allowed him to sense the echo of his chakra. Animals had always been gravitated to Hashirama because of his chakra, much to the clan's ire, as it made being hidden difficult until he gained a grasp on the passive ability. Tobirama couldn't fault their desire to make the compound their home, their senses being more acute compared to humans, likely allowed them to sense the lingering chakra that let them know this place was safe. Tobirama believed that this unique and powerful chakra, coupled with his Mokuton and overall, might played a role in not only allowing him to capture the tailed beasts, but made them all, except for the strongest of them, much more docile and approachable. Fortunately, the compound was functional despite its less than stellar appearance. Tobirama was not an engineer or tradesman. So, while the quick use of clones informed him that many of the compound's buildings were livable, a team would have to be employed to give it a thorough look over. Well prepared for their eventuality, it didn't mean Tobirama liked unwelcome surprises, and right now he wasn't in the mood for them. Walking to the building reserved for the clan head and their family, Tobirama stopped, formed a clone, passed his ward to that clone, and then waited. Less than 5 minutes later, a group of shinobi encircled him, and many were left at his mercy. It wasn't a jest when many dubbed Tobirama as the fastest man of his era, one moment he was in the middle of the new arrivals, the next he appeared in front of each and every one of them, and all flew in multiple directions within less than a second. The man had little fear of damaging his clan compound, as the victims of his assault slammed into a light blue barrier that shocked them fiercely and unforgivably. After a time, some fell and didn't move, and only a few exploded into clouds of smoke that turned out to be logs. When one appeared behind him, Tobirama didn't bother ducking and merely leaned away and blocked the strike with the sword he confiscated from one of the downed ninjas. The clashing of metal on metal released a harsh sound, and the attacker was forced to go on the defensive, one that barely lasted a second before they were sent soaring. Looking back at them, Tobirama gave each ninja a look that had them weak in the knees. And he had barely begun to fight. Chapter 2. Beware the Dragon's Tears. Konoha. Sometime earlier. Chaos. Flames. Destruction. Death. Blood. These were 5 things that the Kunoichi had become well accustomed to over the course of her life. Then again, having lived for as long as she had and being a veteran of the Warring States period, she had seen much during her lifetime. The near destruction of Konoha by the claws of a rampaging Biju, the most powerful of the 9 to be exact, was easily in the top 10 in the old Kunoichi's opinion. In contrast to the ignorant ninja of today, the shadow knew of the 9-tailed beasts, and while no means an expert on them, she knew how much of a threat they posed compared to other gigantic beasts like the Uwabami of the Rikido. She had crossed paths with them during her lifetime, and while her skillset was impressive, she was humble enough to know that facing one not fighting, just facing could be a death sentence unto itself. There was a huge difference between a gigantic but ordinary animal and a walking embodiment of chakra itself. And the destruction brought on by the strongest of the 9 painted a horrific if not apt picture. It's no wonder many call it the Saigai no Ryagm, traveling calamity, the Kunoichi mentally mused as she continued walking and wading through the sea of rubble that littered the streets like corpses on a battlefield. Despite days having passed by since the incident, the woman spotted a noticeable amount of broken bodies and mournful people almost everywhere she looked. Some of the deaths were quick and clean, and from a distance to the untrained eye, one would think them to be resting. The ninja had seen enough deaths, having caused such deaths countless times, to know otherwise. However, other bodies didn't appear so pristine. Intestines were spilled out, limbs and even faces were missing or boiled off, and blood flowed from lacerations like water down the face of a mountain. Parts were ripped off, heads were crushed, gored or gone, some were even partially evaporated by the sheer intensity of the Kyuubi's corrosive and malevolent chakra. But her goal wasn't to help those she saw right now. Her mission was something else entirely. She had been summoned for one purpose, a purpose that had been arranged long ago only, and she was obliged to follow them despite the relationship she had with her summoner. Quiet as a shadow but swift as a bullet from a Tetsu no Kuni to Nagashima, the ninja faded from sight like a mirage, and none were the wiser. Not that any knew she was there anyway. Senju clan compound. Present. Kakashi observed his opponent, 100 thoughts and scenarios going through his head on how he could prove himself. Before this he believed he had nowhere to go but the Anbu. When an opportunity to protect his late mentor's son came up, Kakashi didn't even think once before he took it. Now he just had to figure out how to prove himself. How does it look? A voice behind him called. Though not as skilled a sensor as his former Junin instructor, Kakashi had sensed the incoming ninja nonetheless. What surprised him was who it turned out to be. The Ashi-sama. Kakashi was confused as to why the head of the Hyuga clan was here. His twin brother, actually, a Kunoichi's voice was heard. More accurately, an Uchiha Kunoichi was heard. As Ashi, Mikoto greeted her former teammate. Mikoto, the Hyuga did the same, back again it seems. Neither he nor Mikoto had been in a team ever since she wed and had her firstborn a little over 5 years ago. "Yeah," was Mikoto's awkward reply, and the woman had to blink back tears. Kushina had always been the middleman between the three of them and got them to work together despite her competitive nature. As Ashi shared her discomfort though he managed it better. Both Ashi and Mikoto would admit neither one of them were as close to each other as either one had been to Kushina. The woman had a way of attracting others to her, both bad and good, and had an annoying habit of bringing them out of their shell. Kushina had been a stubborn and obstinate contradiction that somehow managed to change others for the better. She had been one of a kind and a great Kunoichi. Her death, much like his late wife, had left him incredibly vulnerable. His mind trapped in a haze and his legs weak and shaking like a newborn that was just learning to take its first steps. Were it not for his son, the only living memory of his wife, and leaving him without a parent, Ashi didn't want to imagine what would have happened. But in addition, Ashi had no intention of letting Kushina's son be alone in this world either. The moment Ashi learned Naruto had lived was like taking a great deal of weight off his shoulders. "So, how do you want to go about this?" Mikoto asked. Out of all three of them, Ashi had always been the best one to come up with a plan. Skilled as Kushina was in Kenjutsu and unique style of ninjutsu, she had little forte in making plans unless they were on the fly. Even then that was give and take. "You mean other than ensuring we don't get beaten and battered?" Ashi asked rhetorically. "I don't know." "Well, that's great comfort." Kakashi's comment earned him a smack upside the head courtesy of Mikoto. "Kakashi's got a point though," ignoring the Haddock's look. "I had my doubts when I came here. I never expected to actually go face to face against a Nidaime. I thought it was Sandaime-sama testing our resolve." Neither Mikoto nor Kakashi couldn't fault him there. Both of them had their doubts when they came here. But seeing the Nidaime's display and the water he conjured were really making them wonder if it actually was him. "Then why don't we do what Kushina-san did best?" Kakashi put in his 2 cents. "Annoy him. Piss him off. Making him so angry he'll try to kill us. Pretty sure she's looking down on you too and cursing up a storm," Kakashi thought. But then again, and to be fair to her teammates, those were things Minato's wife would have done to her opponents. Hopefully the deceased woman couldn't read his mind. "Actually, I was thinking more along the lines of," Kakashi spoke lowly as he quickly began telling them his plan, or half-plan really. By the end of it, both Mikoto and Ashi looked at one another. "It's risky," Ashi spoke first. Mikoto followed suit, flawed and unexpected. "It's exactly what Kushina-san would have done," Kakashi added. "Not like we have much to go on," Mikoto pointed out. "And our comrades are dropping like flies," Ashi nodded to the fallen ninja and Kunoichi. The man was swift and his movements precise and well-timed. Each blow brought down its target or the clone of those smart enough to try and gauge the man's prowess. It reminded him of their yondaime, which meant it was only a matter of time before the Nidaime set his sights on them again. Elsewhere, Tobirama looked around him to the beaten and battered bodies and the groans and echoes of pain that emanated from them. So far the returned Hokage was not impressed by what he saw. But then again, the former Hokage had always had high standards that even Hiruzen had failed to accomplish in his youth. But even then, the Nidaime had hoped the quality of ninja in this day and age wasn't as bad as he had learned it to be. It was worse. Of the best he asked to be sent to him, which in Tobirama's language was having them face him with everything they had, only 3 had really stood out before they were forced to perform a tactical retreat. They had been losing, badly at that, but not as badly as the rest of them, which made them stand out. A Hyuga, an Uchiha, and a young Haddock of all ninja. The latter came as a surprise not only because Tobirama sensed small amounts of the Uchiha clan's chakra inside him, a transplant if he wasn't mistaken, but also because the Haddock clan had always been a small clan that had never really stood out compared to other clans. He'd have to look into that. His focus was briefly drawn to the ninja sneaking up on him and doing a bad job at it, and Tobirama retaliated by sending them a wave of pressurized air so quickly they were off the roof and on the ground by the time they realized what happened. Another hand seal conjured a serpentine-shaped torrent of water rushing to the side towards the man who thought he had properly hidden himself. Payton, revolving heaven. A destructive yet whirling shield of spinning chakra protected his Ashi from the unforgiving onslaught brought on by the giant water dragon that threatened to crush him. But the act only worked for a few seconds before the intense pressure from the serpentine water caused the roof beneath his feet to buckle, disrupted the ninja's composure, and caused the technique to falter. The Hyuga only just managed to compose himself, but if then the air rushed from his lungs as a small amount of water struck him unforgivably. Forced, he performed a Tobikaten, flying revolving heaven, when the water from the dragon rose and split into multiple projectiles and impacted on the Hyuga clan's ultimate defense. Though small, and the sheer speed of the Katen making it a formidable defensive dome, the impact from the projectiles were fierce, and each hit had him grunt with difficulty. Unfortunately, even when mastered to an incredible degree, the airborne variant of the Katen was inferior to the original. Footwork and traction were key components in making a successful and strong Katen. As a member of the branch family, Hisashi was fortunate to even know the main house's secret technique. Countless hours, days, months, years, well over half a decade of him observing, training and failing had passed before the ninja managed to get it to an acceptable level, and the only variant he knew. Hisashi was no genius, nor as talented as his slightly older brother, but even his father acknowledged he possessed noteworthy talents. But all of that was nothing compared to the raw might unleashed upon him and his fellow ninja. Many of the ninja present were considered Konoha's finest, and all of them were being tossed aside like Greenhorn Academy students. Out of the corner of his eye he saw Kakashi running and dodging and ducking with everything he had, and even then, he was still hit and sent skidding. And when that turned out to be a log destroyed by the Nidaime's technique, the process repeated itself over as the man knew exactly where the boy would appear. Ninpo. Kawara Shuriken, ninja art. Roof tile shuriken. From another rooftop a feminine voice declared, and dozens upon dozens of roof tile projectiles flew from the roof towards the Nidaime. The technique was followed up by a Katen. Hasenketsu Mabeni, fire release. Phoenix Sage Flower Nail Crimson, launching a great number of metal stars covered in fire and cloaking some of the already thrown enhanced clay projectiles in flames, too. With only one hand seal in place, Tobirama calmly muttered, Suiton. Kawaware Tora, water release. River splitting trouble. From out of nowhere did many demonic-like projectiles made out of water appear and swiftly launch themselves at the flying weaponry. The fire-coated weapons did nothing more than hiss and went no further, having stood no chance against its superior elemental opposite. But unlike the broken and halted shuriken, the water continued and rained down on their target with the force of a meteor shower. Had he truly gone all out and had the building not been built by his brothers Mokuton and reinforced with seals, the water would have easily destroyed the building. But even with pulling punches, Tobirama knew his assault would leave a nasty mark on the roof and tiles would have to be replaced. Raiten. Reiken no Jutsu, lightning release. Lightning roar seer technique. Across from them a ninja tried taking advantage of him facing away and dealing with other ninja by sending a destructive wave of lightning towards him. But Tobirama confused them all when he jumped into the technique, stolen sword drawn and the ninja left at his mercy moments later. Haiden. Raijin Geshi, secret. Lightning reversal. Coming out of the technique unharmed, Tobirama swung his now lightning-coated sword in an arc that unleashed a formidable wave of electricity that left the unfortunate ninja and a few others nearby a twitching and spasming mess. Landing gracefully on the ground, Tobirama sensed an incredible build-up in chakra from behind, and his ears were quickly greeted by the sound of 1,000 birds loudly chirping. The man cocked an eyebrow as he saw the youngest of the ninja charge at him with incredible speed that put many here to shame. From here Tobirama could sense that the technique he was using required quite a bit of chakra and even more control. The amount of lightning chakra was one of high concentration he had sensed in a long time. But Tobirama could already see a flaw in it. Linear attack and tunnel vision. That Sharingan is likely offsetting that setback, the man quickly deduced. Using only hand seal, Tobirama muttered his next technique. Suiton. Sujin Funka no Jutsu, water release. Water swift violent bloom technique, from the trail left by his previous techniques, rose forth a mighty bulwark of water that knocked Kakashi off balanced and sent the young but talented ninja soaring through the air. Many witnessed Kakashi disperse, and Tobirama was pleasantly surprised by the boy using his own technique so well. Even back then not many his age could pull that off. Tobirama merely grunted in annoyance when he felt several jaws latch onto his form and weighed him down. Clinging to him were 7 ninkin of various sizes and breed, their jaws locked and their combined weight impeding his movement. Haki. Rakujian SHM, 8 trigrams. 64 palms. Back in the fray, Tobirama grunted and frowned as the Hyuga performed one of his clan's signature techniques. 2 palms. 4 palms. 8 palms. 16 palms. 32 palms. 64 palms. Despite the ninkin blocking some of the usual striking areas, the strikes from the Hyuga were modified perfectly to compensate for the obstruction. Each strike thought out, each hit had needlepoint precision, the flow from one target to the next balanced and complementary to the next set of movements required. When the Hyuga was done, Tobirama then fell victim to another's technique. The resurrected man witnessed a flash of steel flying through the air like a sparrow performing an aerial dance. Shaku no Tachi, manipulating windmill non-upleaf blades. The expert manipulations of the weapons allowed the woman to miss the ninkin and wrap tightly around his limbs and head. It took a special kind of ninja to accomplish such a feat that only a handful could pull off. Its lesser variant and parent technique weren't easy to pull off, it required having intimate knowledge of the weapons and having incredibly dexterous hands alongside above average eye coordination. When the technique was done, Tobirama sensed a buildup of chakra once more. The Nidaime had to hand it to the young boy. He knew how to quickly take advantage of a situation when it presented itself. Rain. Chidori, lightning release. 1000 birds. Was the boy's cry. Decent tact. The boy knew he couldn't take me on by himself and teamed up with 2 others, the string of techniques and the coordination was too well done for it to have not been a team effort. The 3 definitely had his attention now. But he was also done playing. Above and their bloodline limit sensing the fluctuations in his chakra, Hisashi moved into a defensive formation, while one of the Mikotos abandoned their set of wires that held Tobirama. At his current speed and the distance between himself and his target, Kakashi sensed the incoming technique too late for him to pull off anything. Instead he found himself taking a trip down memory lane as he was barreled by Hisashi and then shielded by a wall of risen earth just as the held Tobirama went up in a great explosion. The violent discharge destroyed more than half of Mikoto's technique and Mikoto herself had taken a decent hit to the head by a chunk of flying stone. Hisashi himself grunted when some had struck his now bleeding back. Bunshin Daibakuha, clone great explosion, Kakashi identified the technique. Neither of them could contemplate their next course of action as the entire compound shook and shuddered as if it was in between the feet of a colossal titan going for a casual stroll. The light in the area dimmed far too swiftly, as if the night sky covered the stars above in an impenetrable blanket that absorbed all light. And the sound of water that reached their ears made everyone think they were standing at the bottom of an enormous waterfall. One by one did the group of ninjas look upwards, and one by one did many begin to fall down on their posteriors, their legs shaking so much it became impossible to stand, while others were in and out of consciousness the moment their gaze landed at the sheer enormity that loomed above them. Ninja were trained to become highly tolerant of fear, but even the most hardened ninja's resolve would strip away into nothing as they fell victim to Tobirama's technique. Its looping and coiling had many thinking of a snake, its body wider than the largest giant tree in Hai no Kuni, its body a raging river that looked ready to pulverize whatever it came in contact with into dust. Its eyes were a menacing red that scared anyone brave enough to look into them, whiskers flowed alongside its body that were nearly a quarter of its entire length, and antlers protruded from its head. It was a sight no one would forget. The dragon roared on and shot forward, and the shinobi that weren't overcome by terror, or at the very least managed it better than most, prepared themselves for the worst. While the dragon dove at them, it unexpectedly took an upward turn at the last minute and went skyward before it disappeared into the dark skies. The dragon's sudden disappearance had many perplexed and others filled with hopeful optimism. But others weren't so easily fooled or caught off guard. Something's coming, Kakashi saw that the dragon had been filled with an enormous amount of chakra, and something of such size was not easily maintained even by above-average chakra control. Creating it took control of the highest levels possible and superior mastery over an element that few to none had ever been able to accomplish. Wasting it all for a mere scare made no sense to the young prodigy. His eyes widened a second later and he couldn't help himself, take cover. Kakashi's warning left several shinobi confused and others running or summoning forth whatever form of defense they could. Seeing Makoto blur through a set of hand seals, Kakashi copied and complemented the technique with his own. Oten. Nijuso Doja Heki no Jutsu, Earth Release. Double-layered Earth Locking Wall Technique. Hyuga Kekai. Haki Kusho no Jin, Hyuga Barrier. 8 trigrams Wind Palm Formation. Around the trio formed a strong half-dome of earth that covered their entire bodies, and surrounding it like a protective cloak was a spinning vacuum shell that offered additional protection. Others nearby performed their own protective techniques or took cover somewhere as best they could, while some had yet to overcome their fear and remained rooted. Countless raindrops then began to fall from the sky, and destruction followed in their wake. The force of a single droplet was enough to make a ninja grunt and have them stagger. The combined might of countless droplets had made their targets fall to the ground and sink dozens of feet into the earth. It was as if gravity had increased tenfold, and before long, many could not withstand the intense pressure brought on by the attack. When the rain stopped, those that survived breathed a sigh of relief but would receive no reprieve and would regret letting up prematurely once the attack resumed mere seconds later. And this time more fiercely than ever. Despite its elemental advantage over water, Kakashi, Hisashi and Makoto grunted and were forced to push even more chakra into maintaining their protective shelter. All of them were sweating something fierce, moisture exuded from their pores and fell from their faces as if they were taking a shower. I've heard of this technique, Kakashi heard the Hyuga mutter, Sarakrixei no Jutsu, Azure Flowing Dragon Star Technique, it's one of Tobirama-sama's strongest water techniques and easily his most feared. Enemy ninja called it the Raikiri, Dragon's Tears, because of it. Hut to the end. Kakashi heard his Earth Dome creating partner shout. The technique will only get stronger if I remember. And by the end of it there will be nothing left of us once the final strikes happens. When will that happen? Kakashi asked and gasped as the rain intensified once more and water rapidly began to flow from the cracks that briefly formed in the structure. With some effort the cracks were quickly covered up, but by then the group was almost a foot deep in water. Less than 10 seconds had passed. When the water dragon comes crashing down upon us with enough force to make a new lake, the Hyuga informed them, his vision blurring as the increased chakra needed to reinforce the dome nearing too much for him to handle. Why would he unleash such a technique? He wanted to test us. What does he hope to gain from this? The woman shouted, and Kakashi could only wonder the same thing. What did the man get out of killing them? Hearing the thunderous roar of the dragon, Kakashi couldn't ponder any more on the topic, and all three of them focused everything they had to ensure their combined technique allowed them to survive. The pressure they all felt was unlike anything they ever experienced, and their defense lasted no more than 2 seconds before it gave way from the intensity of it all. I'm sorry, sensei. I'm sorry, Kushina. Those were their last thoughts before Kakashi, Hisashi and the Makoto felt darkness overcome them the moment the water made contact with their bodies, and the intensity of it all was too much for them to bear. And then, all three knew nothing more. Inton. Sanshi Sume. Kai, Yin Release. Scenic Beauty. Dissipation. Gasping and eyes widening, Kakashi scanned the area from his position and saw to his astonishment that the compound remained intact, bone dry and body free. Everywhere he saw ninja and kunoichi arising from the ground in a daze, and many looked relieved that they were alive and unharmed. What was that? Kakashi heard someone ask, and the boy couldn't help himself as he uttered the answer. An illusion. An incredibly powerful illusion. Despite not being shaken by what transpired, Kakashi was a bit unnerved. It took a once-in-a-lifetime gifted individual to pull off something like this, and Kakashi tried to think of who could have the skill to do so. Kurenai was skilled in the field and the best of their group, but she lacked the power necessary to perform such a massive and undetectable illusion. Senju Tobirama was said to have been skilled in all matters of ninja aspects, but he had never been known for his illusions despite being skilled in the field. The Kurama clan of Konoha came to mind, but they had long since become a shadow of their past selves, and even then no one from that clan had ever been documented to have possessed such prowess in illusions. How? Makoto was floored and scared even. The Sharingan was known for its ability to detect chakra fluctuations, and an illusion on this kind of scale should have been detected by her. I believe I can shed some light on the matter. Appearing before then in a whirl of leaves and dust no worse for wear, Tobirama was seen with his arms by his side and a woman on his left. Many armed themselves as they saw the two, and Makoto could not blame them for what they had just been through. The man, however, didn't even bat an eye at their actions. One moment he was there and the next he reappeared at the exact same spot with various weapons ranging from kunai to tanto and swords. What the hell? My tools. How'd he do that? It really is him. Before the illusion reveal, Makoto had her doubts, but the man's sheer speed that matched Minato's, coupled with his mastery over water, blew all doubts away. Only one man in Konoha's history had ever simultaneously possessed such skill in those areas. Silence. You are shinobi of Konoha. You will act as is befit your station. His voice was thunder in their ears and carried power that rendered many immobile, some lost consciousness, and the man shook his head. If he wanted to, Tobirama could have killed them all then and there by the time it took them to finish blinking. Clearing his throat, Tobirama continued, "Ninja of Konoha. May I present Senju Tmka," Tobirama introduced, and while many were ignorant, Mikoto, however, was scared. Worrisome as the revelations were that the Nidaime Hokage was back from the dead, the current reveal left Mikoto even more worried. But it also answered how such an illusion had been possible. Senju Tmka, better known as Inta no Tmka, Tmka of the Yin release, Saka no Senju Ichizoku, Senju clan's author, or more infamously known as Uchiha Garashi no Tmka, Uchiha Killer Tmka, had been a powerful kunoichi that if talk was true, even Madara had praised. And it was with good reason. While her might wasn't on the same level as Madara, Hashirama or Tobirama, Senju Tmka had easily been the Tsunade of her day. The Senju's illusions were immensely feared during the Warring States period, and her prowess, which was said to have been the equivalent of Tobirama's unparalleled skill and suitin in the field, had marked her as the absolute best illusionist of her era. Even in this day and age, no one came close to matching her skill in Genjutsu. Countless Uchiha during that time had fallen under her spell and ended up dead shortly afterwards. Hashirama had been the strongest of the Senju, Tobirama had been regarded as the smartest, but it had been said that many had feared Tmka more, as she had been notorious for felling Uchiha, regardless of age or gender. Tobirama only came at a close second. Mikoto wouldn't doubt Tmka would have been used as a means to get unruly children to listen to their elders. However, Tmka's attire was a stark contrast to what the woman was said to have looked like. Bereft of the battle armor once worn by the Senju, she instead donned a pair of ripped light blue pants that ended with her feet being in a pair of dark stilettos of all things. The choice for her upper half was hardly any better, as well the dark green travel kimono cloak on her shoulders was tasteful. Underneath it was a matching t-shirt with the Senju clan crest that went across her sizable bust, but the casual top was too short as it also showed off her slim but defined midriff. The only thing that relatively remained the same was the woman's hairstyle, but the glasses with orange flash-colored lenses were new. "Interesting look," many heard Tobirama say. The former Nidaime Hokage mentally admitted it was not what they were expecting, and while different than what he was used to, it had an appeal to it. "Whatever it takes, Tobirama," Tmka told her cousin and took a drag from her kiseru. "You smoke now?" Something else that was new. "Not like it can do anything to me," she commented, and Tobirama realized it was a fair point. "Besides, after seeing how bad they did, I need something to calm my nerves." "Impossible." Kakashi heard a ninja utter, likely one more familiar about the woman's identity. The adolescent Junin could understand why. Senju Tmka was easily over 100 years old, and the woman before them was clearly in her late 20s or early 30s. An illusion. Or had she managed to cheat death similarly to Tobirama? "No, what's impossible is how bad all of you performed. On a scale of 1 to 10, the lot of you went past the planet's core, and there was the sharp tongue and brutal honesty Tobirama remembered, and Hashirama often found himself the victim of. I don't understand." A woman tried asking for an explanation. "And I won't bother answering to an imbecile who can't figure out something so simple," was all Tmka said before she looked away from the woman and pointed to another. You lot over there and you ate over there. Dismissed. You won't be needed." "Hey, wait a sec." The man never finished his sentence as his face hit the ground and he was out like a light. And all Tmka had done was whistle. Another had moved to defend his comrade, his sword drawn and ready to cut the woman in half if it came to it. Tmka was quick though, very quick. Hitenshu, breaking point kick, the kick that struck his back was painful as it was swift, and the defiant ninja was sent flying. If bones from the initial impact weren't broken before, and they likely were, then crashing into a wall of reinforced stone either did or turned them into shrapnel. Many were left unnerved by the sudden and unexpected movement. And they had a right to it. Statistically speaking, those that specialized in Genjutsu, those that specialized in any particular branch, were often found lacking in a particular department. Despite her age, Kurenai's skill in Genjutsu was easily Junin level, but her focus on said skill made her average in Taijutsu and Ninjutsu. I, who focused on Taijutsu and Bukijutsu, much like Kurenai, found himself only barely just averaging out in Ninjutsu and was below average in Genjutsu. Those that specialized in a field but weren't lacking in others were a cut above the rest and often the ones enemy ninja had to keep an eye on. Such ninja had the potential of becoming notable shinobi down the line and possibly even become crucial to their village or even become their village's leader. That or become a cut above the cut above. The woman introduced as Tmka had not only enthralled them all in an illusion not even the Sharingan could detect but also demonstrated considerable speed and strength despite her current footwear not being suited for such forms of combat. Moving on. Despite being attacked, Tmka didn't miss her stride and continued on as though nothing happened. "You 4 are gone. You 5. Gone. You too, oh, you are definitely gone. The woman continued on for some time before her gaze landed on Makoto, Hisashi and Kakashi. You three, you stay. Out of all of them, you showed some promise, but that's a low bar. Dismissed. All three of them blinked while the rest of their comrades left the compound as ordered. Did she just insult yet compliment us in the same breath? I believe so, Makoto, Hisashi said. At least she didn't kick us, Kakashi added. Of her time, Tobirama's voice greeted them from behind. His sudden and unexpected appearance unnerved and saddened Kakashi. It reminded him too much of his recently deceased mentor. Moments later did Tamka appear beside him. But I don't understand, Kakashi heard Makoto speak. Senju Tamka's been dead for well over 60 years. How could she be? Of course, and Uchiha would get straight to that. Tamka cut her off. Don't think I'm unaware of your clan not being unhappy when I died, but then again, I can't fault them for it. I was your clan's worst nightmare, she chuckled a little darkly. You slaughtered my clansmen like cattle. Much like many in her clan, Makoto had been raised to hate Senju Tamka. They praised and admired her skill as a kunoichi, but the action she took against her clan didn't give her many fans even decades after her death. Yugaku and the others aren't going to like this, she could already imagine the look on their faces. And your clan did the same to mine, what's your point? Over 60 years ago, you either lived or you died, and you did whatever it took to protect your clan. I was just better at it than most. Killing Uchiha was something I did better than most. So for the sake of my cousin's dream I left and died, Tamka rebutted. Left, Tamka-sama. Hisashi was curious. History can be written by the victors, by the losers, or by an impartial audience, and it can still be wrong. Recorded history will never be 100% accurate. I admired Hashirama's strength as a leader and as a ninja, but that didn't mean I supported everything my idiot cousin did. While your history books teach your current generation that both clans were happy that the Senju and Uchiha clans' conflicts had come to an end, those with half a brain knows it didn't mean that all of us were fans of integrating with each other in the same village. You can't expect clans that have been fighting and killing one another over countless generations to suddenly stop hating each other, do you? She asked, and none of the three younger ninjas could fault her for that logic. Even in this day and age there was still a case of bad blood between certain clans. Most managed to put it aside and settle their differences, but it wasn't unheard of for some to still have disputes with one another. Mkaa and a few other Senju members had been one of them and couldn't be a part of the village Hashirama had planned. Tobirama hadn't been a fan of it either and hadn't been a fan of them wanting to leave either. Other clans and Uchiha clansmen had the same mindset and for the sake of Hashirama's dream, sacrifices had to be made. Having internal conflicts amongst the populace because many couldn't coexist together would have shifted the Shadai's dream into a bloody nightmare instead. Nothing could be done or said by the Senju brothers to that would convince them to stay. Too many fresh wounds coupled with the fact that many had lived by the iron code of the shinobi. 1. Loyalty to the clan is absolute. You give your life to keep it safe first and foremost. 2. The parent is absolute. Their will must be honored and obeyed. 3. The master is absolute. You give your life to keep him safe or accomplish the mission he gives you. If taken, you bring him back at any cost. If killed, you must avenge him by any means necessary. Those had been Senju Bitsuma's words to Tobirama and his brothers, as had they been the words of every parent to their children during that period. Hashirama had never been a believer of the Iron Code and often came to blows with his father because of it. During Konoha's founding, the Will of Fire had been created as a means to replace the Iron Code of the shinobi. Instead of the clan, a ninja's loyalty was to the village first, their clan second. It had been one of the reasons why Tobirama founded the academy, influenced the next and more impressionable generation into a new way of thinking. The clan who looked only after their own interests was detrimental to the safety of the village. Something the Uchiha clan had not wholly accepted, even more after Madara's death, and why Tobirama had kept as many eyes on them as he had. However, many had been born and raised under those rules since the moment they could walk, and it was hard to live a different life than one was used to. In the end, while the members swore their loyalty would forever be with their clan, Tobirama could do nothing while Hashirama reluctantly allowed them to leave. During his time alive, Tobirama had kept track of those that hadn't wished to be integrated with the village, and for the sake of the village, he had more than once been forced to take cloak and dagger tactics against them, members of his own clan included. As far as he knew only Tamka remained. Tamka's departure, Tobirama had to admit, did have the desired effect in smoothing out the Senju clan's relationship with the Uchiha. And for a time, Tobirama had believed things were heading in the right direction. Tobirama wouldn't admit it out loud, he'd be a fool if he did, but the Konoha military police force had been created to keep an eye on the Uchiha and protect Konoha. However, ultimately it had also been done as a means to see if the Uchiha clan would start putting their village first instead of themselves, as had many other clans in Konoha. The Uchiha had always been dedicated in their goals, and for the sake of his deceased brother, Tobirama had hoped that dedication would shift to something more beneficial for the village and their clan. But grudges and wrongs died especially hard with the Uchiha clan. The clan was an emotionally charged one. The Uchiha clan's emotions gave them their greatest strength but also served as their greatest weakness. A weakness that more often than not they fell victim to where only the extremely rare few ever managed to overcome or avoid. Tobirama knew and was prepared for what would have to be done if it looked like the clan's intentions would no longer be in Konoha's best interest. Hopefully with him back such notions wouldn't go very far. But, unlike Hashirama would in this matter, Tobirama wouldn't hesitate to put them down for good if it came to it. Tumka's return would probably have a domino effect, but for what he needed to do to ensure his clan's survival and subsequent return, her assistance was required. He was fortunate Hashirama was no longer with him. Despite having taken a role in wiping out a clan before, Tobirama believed this was a different matter that would have made his brother hesitate. So, let's get things straight and not beat around the bush. Uchiha or not, you show promise and skill. So long as you protect the boy with your life and do your duty, I won't have a reason to turn you brain dead. You all know who he is, what he is, and I'm not stupid to not know you know who his parents were. The boy's the last remaining link to your friends and in your case your mentor, she directed that last bit towards Kakashi. I'm not here to just babysit you. I'm here to ensure you're all up to par so you can properly do your duty. But make no mistake. If me being here is going to be a problem, I won't hesitate take my foot and use it to launch your ass back to your compound and make you stay there. Are we clear on that? As the woman approached them, Makoto realized that Tumka was by no means a short woman like the average-sized Uchiha matriarch. Tumka was tall, easily over a foot taller than Makoto, which made her the tallest woman the Uchiha had ever encountered, and Makoto's sharp mind coupled with her Sharingan allowed her to estimate that the woman was a good 4 or 5 centimeters taller than Tobirama, even without her stilettos. What she did was the basic scare and intimidation tactic. And damn had her size not helped in making it effective. Dismissed. Report back tomorrow bright and early at 6 o'clock in the morning, Tobirama ordered them. I have a baby, Makoto was about to add. I don't care. You're a kunoichi. Just because you have children don't expect me to give you special treatment. You either dedicate yourself and figure something out or we'll find someone else. Dismissed. Tumka told her. Makoto frowned but nodded nonetheless, and much like her compatriots she disappeared in a whirlwind of leaves and dust. You realize we're going to have to take their family situation into consideration, Tobirama told her. I know. I'm a hard-ass bitch, but I'm not cruel, Tobirama would have argued that, but let the comments slide. But even then, I need to see how much they're willing to endure, Tumka finished and wrapped herself up in her kimono, the purpose of her unassuming attire having accomplished its task, and the night was cool. Tumka then cocked an eyebrow when she saw an elderly man appear before them. The woman saw as he paused to blink and then sigh before he continued making his way towards them. Hiruzen for his part was only slightly bothered by the fact that another Senju was back from the dead and looked young enough to be his daughter. Had Tumka not worn and wrapped herself around her travel kimono, then Hiruzen would have had to suppress a blush from her choice attire. Mourning widower or not, and while not as intense, Hiruzen had a weakness for attractive women like his hot-blooded male of a student and appreciated an attractive figure. Hiruzen had never seen the woman in person, having been born almost only a couple of years after Konoha's founding, he had seen portraits of her in the Senju compound. Hiruzen was tempted to call shenanigans on the Senju clan's vitality if this was one of the perks. With how close the Uzumaki and Senju bloodline were, it made the Sandane wonder if Mito had purposely hidden her true appearance. The current Hokage. Tumka looked to her now nodding cousin. Tumka, this is my former student and current acting Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. Saru, my cousin, Senju Tumka, the Nidaime introduced. Hiruzen. Sasuke's boy. Tumka was surprised. Sasuke had been a mountain of a man taller than her by almost half a head, and Hiruzen was the exact opposite. He takes after his mother, Tobirama informed much to Hiruzen's embarrassment. But even then, it didn't stop Hiruzen from asking his question. You knew my father, Tumka-sama? Hiruzen asked. Only in passing. But enough to know that I was surprised that a womanizer like him actually settled down, the man had been the bane of women, kunoichi and civilian alike. She wouldn't put it past the man to have fathered more than 1 or 2 children out of wedlock. My mother had her ways, powerful as my father was, Hiruzen informed the famous Senju. His mother had been an average Junin, average for those times, but she knew how to keep Sasuke on the straight and narrow. But now wasn't the time for thinking on such things. How bad did they do? Hiruzen asked. If this was the good old days, they'd be dead 1,000 times over, Hiruzen blinked and was taken aback by the woman's blunt statement. Surely I'll trust your judgment. Hiruzen saw the look Tobirama sent him that practically said, run as soon as you finish that sentence. It was a look his former mentor always had whenever he had to prevent someone from getting into a world of hurt. Smart boy. You've been trained well. Wish I could say the same about the rest of your shinobi, Tsunade added. All in all, I'll have my hands full in bringing them up to my standards. The boys too critical to be left in mediocre hands, talented as they were, Tsunade and Tobirama came from an era that produced stronger ninja and forced them to have higher standards than those of today. Talented and skilled in this day and age to them was average. You will keep their personal lives and duties into consideration, correct? Hiruzen asked and also wondered how skilled these three would be after being pushed by a cage-level ninja and easily the top kunoichi of her time. A ninja that can't handle multiple things is no ninja in my books. Hiruzen hoped he could take that as a yes, despite sounding anything but. Speaking of a ninja that can't handle things. I believe that's your niece, Tobirama and a pig. The air grew cold and Hiruzen and Tsunade shivered at the intense release in chakra. Powerful and skilled as he was, Tobirama and Hashirama had always possessed more powerful chakra than their student. Shrugging off such an intense feeling was not easy even for one as powerful as himself. Hiruzen looked to his only female student and saw the look of disbelief and fright, and the Sandaime hoped she was prepared for what was to come. Niece or not, Tobirama didn't tolerate failure and tolerated a weak will even less. He hoped she would be up for the tasks before her. Chapter 3. Harsh. A couple of hours earlier. The small village of Kasha had less than 1,000 inhabitants living in it and had never been one of great renown when compared to its neighbor village Konoha. It was a peaceful place to frequent, especially during the winter, and one that few none wanted to attack because it was so close to Konoha, who had a few ninjas stationed as ordinary civilians, and because other than its hot springs, it had little value. The only thing that really stood out was the small bar and gambling hall within the hot spring resort, which was where the village made most of its income on the tourist trade, since it was built near one of the few natural hot springs in the Land of Fire. And, it was also home to the Dragon Spring Sake, a high-quality and well-liked drink. The sake was ranked as one of the top best alcoholic beverages in Hai no Kuni and a favorite of the daimyo of Hai no Kuni. The drink was expensive too, but also brewed infrequently and in limited quantity. Said drink, from what Jiraiya had been informed, had just recently been announced to be back on tap. Best hit the bar, Jiraiya mused and walked as quickly as he could. Were it any other time he would have taken it easy and seen the sights, but right now he couldn't afford to dally. When the Toad Sage of Konoha had been told he was to find Tsunade and fast, Jiraiya would have never assumed such orders would come from his mentor's predecessor of all people. Had the words not come from Hiruzen's mouth themselves, then Jiraiya would have likely ignored it and gone to the nearest happy bar for some well-earned R&R. With the last few days and getting even less than little sleep out of it, the man believed he deserved a bit of me time. Even then he almost been tempted to. No rest for the wicked, Jiraiya thought and sighed. Managing a large spy network was not an easy job, nor was it without varying degrees of stress. And with what he tasked with accomplishing, Jiraiya was certain each passing day aged him prematurely. Which would suck as the women of the world would be deprived of one of its finest bachelors. Tsunade would have said he'd have to dish out more money to get a woman's attention. Better find her and fast, Jiraiya was happy that fortune had been kind to him. According to his sources, Tsunade had apparently been spotted in the village not too far from Konoha. By ninja speed, of course. Jiraiya knew his old teammate's habits well enough to know that if a village was too close to Konoha, she would not frequent it unless under the right circumstances. Right now, Jiraiya guessed the woman was either trying or actually was getting shit-faced drunk on the Dragon Spring Sake. That in itself was a dangerous undertaking. Getting Tsunade away from a drink at times was just as dangerous as actually fighting her. However, regardless of her not being on active duty since the end of the Second Shinobi World War and drowning herself in booze and debt, Tsunade remained a formidable and powerful kunoichi nonetheless. It was one of the reasons why she needed to come back. While her back from the dead granduncle wanted her to come home and face the music, Jiraiya also believed that Konoha also needed its best medic and most powerful kunoichi to act as one of its many deterrents. Hopefully this won't end with me getting broken bones, Jiraiya involuntarily shuddered at the thought, having already been the victim of the woman's wrath before and the memory of it had given Jiraiya a healthy amount of fear. A second verse same as the first scenario was something the man would like to avoid at all cost. As he saw the bar with a crowd in front of the entrance, Jiraiya began to make his way towards it and observed how many were suddenly forced to duck as several men went soaring high out of it above the nearby houses. Distant splashes told him they landed in nearby hot springs or rivers and only confirmed his intel. Yep, she's definitely here and she's either drunk or angry. Great, just great, neither scenario was a good one. Luck had brought him here, but apparently that's all it was going to do for him. Stealing his resolve, Jiraiya pushed away the crowd and ignored their complaints of him cutting in front. The couple of bouncers looked at him, but Jiraiya stopped any action they would have taken by placing a large wad of Ryo bills in their hands, hardly a dent in his personal fortune, and easily entered the bar where he was greeted by a lovely sight. Healthy and perky, a nice bounce to them, and no sagging whatsoever. A pretty face that would make other women envious and likely have married men contemplate marital suicide by infidelity. She was the woman of his dreams. "Can I help you?" Unfortunately, the pretty crimson-haired with black highlights hostess wasn't the target of his search, and Jiraiya didn't have the luxury of time. It didn't stop the man from making a mental note to come back later when he could. Looking for an old friend. Blonde, short, bit of a temper. Has a younger female companion with her and is likely the reason why 3 of your patrons are taking an involuntary swim, he informed her and almost cursed at the look she was now giving him. "Booth in the back," she told him curtly and then directed her attention elsewhere. "Well, so much for coming back for an easy win. Thanks, Tsunade." He could only imagine what Tsunade did to earn herself some fans. Part of him wondered why those men had been thrown out the way they did, but that wasn't important right now. Jiraiya merely made his way towards the booth and saw the 2 kunoichi and a pig of all things, that's new. "Jiraiya-sama. Jiraiya. What the hell are you doing here?" "Well, there goes my entrance." Distracted by the small swine in the brunette's arms, Jiraiya lost his chance at starting the conversation. Fortunately, despite her cheeks being a bit red, Tsunade wasn't drunk. It didn't mean this wasn't going to be easy to deal with. "Could ask you the same, but knowing your love of sake and this being one of the rare few times this particular brew's available." "Cut the crap, Jiraiya. This isn't a coincidence, and your bullshit won't work on me," Tsunade cut him off. Jiraiya had been right, she wasn't quite that drunk yet. "Sharp as ever," Jiraiya said, but Tsunade merely scoffed at the compliment. "Should have known this would happen," Tsunade grumbled. Her winning big before he arrived had been an indicator, but she had hoped to be proven wrong. Her bad luck, however, decided to rear its ugly head once more. "I'll say this once and only once." "No," Tsunade bluntly told him, pouring herself another saucer and then gulping it down just as quickly. Her cheeks now a little redder. "So, you've heard," he wondered. "Pretty sure all of High no Kuni and then some knows, Jiraiya." Tsunade took another saucer full to the lips. "Damn brats. What were they thinking?" Jiraiya didn't respond and merely took a swig himself in honor of his deceased student and his wife. Both talented and too young to have left this world. Konoha was poor without them. "We need you, Tsunade." Jiraiya was being sincere. Her fear of blood notwithstanding, Tsunade's skills as a medic were easily the best. Tsunade had been one of the major reasons why Konoha came out on top in the Second Shinobi World War. Poisons had been a major component of that war, and Tsunade's expertise in the field of medicine enabled Konoha to effectively counter every one of them. Antidotes had been developed and deployed on many fronts, allowing them to push the enemies back. But Tsunade thought differently. "Ha. And I thought I was the drunk. Last time. No. Like I said, tell sensei I'm not coming back." "Tsunade-sama, perhaps we should." Shizune never managed to finish her sentence. "That's gonna be hard, Tsunade, giving it wasn't sensei that ordered you back," Jiraiya informed the 2. "Is Sandame-sama alright, Jiraiya-sama?" A worried Shizune asked, and Jiraiya saw the subtle change in movement in Tsunade when she asked that. "Good, she's not too far gone," at least Jiraiya hoped she wasn't. "The old man's fine. Getting on in years, but fine. But I can't say the same about Konoha right now. We've been doing what we can, but having the both of you back will definitely improve things and get our people back on their feet more quickly," he informed Tsunade's apprentice, much to her relief. "So, who's in charge then?" "Those 2 fossils. Better not be Danzo of all people because you can really forget about me going back if that's the case." Despite the small crush she had on him in her younger years, all 4 Konoha elders had been quite attractive in their youth. Tsunade didn't care for the man. "By your uncle's orders, Tsunade." Jiraiya dropped the bomb. Shizune was confused and Tsunade looked angry and would have lashed out at him had he not thought quickly and poured the woman a drink. She ignored it. "Not funny, Jiraiya. Your Obama OG died a week before my grandfather did, so if this is your way of being. Not your mother's brother. Your grandfather's brother," the man clarified and stopped her in her tracks by giving her a scroll. Tsunade frowned but took the rolled up parchment nonetheless. As she opened it, both Jiraiya and Shizune saw Tsunade grow paler and paler until she could almost rival Orochimaru. Tsunade wasn't even done reading before the woman dropped the scroll, her nerves shaken and her hands unable to properly hold the saucer that fell from her grasp. "Time. Tsunade-sama. Yuhi." Tsunade said nothing to either one of them and did nothing for the longest time before she got up and made her way out of the bar. Jiraiya and Shizune and the little piglet following after her. Both wondering where she was going until Jiraiya saw which direction she was heading in. Well, that was easy, Jiraiya thought. But at the same time the man couldn't help but wonder what exactly was written in that scroll to compel the woman to return home without much of a fight. Konoha present. Tobirama had to admit that he didn't expect Tsunade to have arrived in Konoha so soon. The order for her to return or face the consequences had only just been given a little over 3 hours ago. Perhaps word of Konoha's current predicament had reached her, and the woman, despite her history and woe is me story, still cared for Konoha on some level. But Tobirama could care less for that at the moment. Tsunade was here, good, but she never should have left anyway. Her skill in medical ninjutsu was said to be the very best of the best, if not the best, in this day and age. But it didn't make her a good medic in his opinion. A good medic, much like a good ninja, would have endured the hardships thrown at them. A good medic would have faced them on and seek help rather than give in and leave when the going got tough. How many died because she wasn't here doing her duty? There was no doubt in Tobirama's mind that others had gone through the same as Tsunade but hadn't thrown in the towel. There was also the fact that she was a Senju, a clan descended from the very first god of ninja, the sage of six paths himself. The Senju clan had also been one of the top clans in all the world, and their actions had influenced and shaped history throughout the ages. When Tsunade had become the last, it had been her responsibility to ensure the clan survived as well as remembered for what they represented. Instead she did the exact opposite, and her actions likely had many questioning the worth of the Senju clan. Out loud it would never be said of course, and he had been informed that many in this day and age fondly remembered his brother and the Senju clan for their deeds. Had it been over half a century ago, such sentiments would be exact opposite. While the Senju clan descended from the son of the Rakuto Sennin that preached love was the path to peace, a belief Tobirama personally didn't wholly buy into. Like his deceased brother, the clan didn't get to be number one by not conquering others. Oh, Tobirama loved his niece, but that didn't stop him from being ashamed of her at the moment. And as their gaze met one another, did his face hardened. Tobirama saw her flinch. She's read my message, at least she had done something right. Looking at her, Tobirama couldn't help but remark how much the small girl he once knew had grown into a beautiful woman. Truthfully, the girl's appearance reminded Tobirama so much of her mother and great-grandmother, Tobirama's mother, that it briefly lessened the intense feelings he had for her. But it didn't last long, and it did little to quell the anger he felt towards his niece. "We'll leave you alone, sensei," Hiruzen spoke. Tobirama merely nodded. Out of the corner of his eye did the Nidaime see his former student give Tsunade a look that likely wished her luck. The man wanted to scoff. Danzo had been right, Hiruzen had been too lenient with his students. One, a missing ninja privy to Konoha's secrets and information that held a sadistic streak, meant for 100 men that sought immortality by using his own people as guinea pigs. Another, a prodigal daughter of the Senju clan and renowned medic that suffered from hemophobia that ultimately quit when the going got too tough. The only real ninja was the deviant self-proclaimed super pervert. His unbecoming tendencies aside, tendencies that reminded him too much of Hashirama to be honest, at least Jiraiya the Toad Sage had stayed loyal and true to Konoha despite his own losses. Tobirama would have to meet the man when he had the opportunity, but right now he needed to teach his wayward niece a lesson. Do you know why the leaders of the Great Five hidden villages are called Kage? Tobirama asked but received no reply. Well, I'd gather it's not a well-known story in this day and age. Back during the era of warring states, those that were Kage-level ninja were formerly called Chonin, peerless ninja. Not quite as appealing, I'll admit. But decades before the twilight years of that period there rose a ninja of incredible renown. Hashirama and I were just boys, but as first and second sons we attended the clan meetings where they came up. I would never forget the day we learned about it. How could I not? It happened 2 days after my brother Itama was killed. Tsunade felt a bead of sweat fall down her face. Her uncle had a unique way of dealing out punishment that brought the famed ninja back to the days when she was no more than a little girl bouncing on her grandfather's knee. With Hashirama things were simple and repercussions pretty much non-existent. The same couldn't be said about her granduncle. We knew not their name nor their gender nor what clan they originated from. They had no affiliation whatsoever. For all we know it could have been multiple shinobi disguising themselves as one. All we know is that they had been around since before my father's time and they fought and killed any who dared face them. They fought at night and day. They fought clans, nobles and civilians. They cared not who the target was. They were even believed to have been responsible for taking down minor countries and several clans by themselves. For what reason has never been discovered, but their actions had some believing they were the Rakuto Sennin, sage of six paths, himself. But regardless of whether that was true or not, what was certain was that their actions eclipsed all others at the time. I honestly believed that one day every clan would fall under their shadow and nothing would be the same ever again. People took to calling them Kage, Shadow, and they were revered as the pinnacle of ninja of our time. They were idolized just as much as they were feared. What happened to them? Tsunade dared ask. Fortunately, Tobirama only gave her a sideways glance. No one knows. Their appearances suddenly stopped. Their identity never discovered, just as the reasons behind their actions were never discovered. Cage disappeared off the face of the earth, Tobirama informed his grandniece, but regardless of Cage's origin, they still had a profound impact on ninja. From then on, the term Cage was used instead of Chonin to describe the pinnacle of ninja prowess. And when Konoha was founded and a leader needed to be selected, I had been the one to coin the term Hokage, and the other great villages copied us soon after their own communities were formed. And from the good that Hashirama brought did the term Cage become to be seen as not just the strongest, but as the smartest and wisest and most willing to protect and the one to endure the most for the sake of their village. And you, Tsunade, as granddaughter of the first Hokage and grandniece of the second, should know that better than most. And now it began. Tell me, instead of doing your duty, what have you been doing all this time? Danzo had informed him, and Hiruzen had confirmed his apprentice's story, but Tobirama wanted to hear it from the woman's own mouth. Tsunade looked downwards, but Tobirama was having none of that. Look at me, you coward. Face me as a true Senju would. The intensity in Tobirama's voice rose, but the man never yelled. He didn't have to. The Nidaime had a way of making one squirm and feel weak without having to resort to such things. Tears flowed down Tsunade's face as she looked at her granduncle and answered, you wouldn't understand. Don't give me that. Tobirama nearly barked at his niece, and despite herself, Tsunade cowed under her great-uncle's withering stare even more. Once again, she felt as though she were a little girl again with her hand caught in cookie jar. Hashirama hadn't never really minded, but Tobirama had always been one for discipline and had always doled out punishment. I lost my brothers. I lost my mother and father. I lost cousins, uncles and aunts. I watched as I lost countless friends, allies and fellow clansmen, many of them children, no less, as they were butchered on blood-soaked battlefields ever since I was 5 years old, Tsunade. I buried them all, too, yet not once did I give in to despair and give up. Had I done so, I'd be dishonoring them, and their lives would be for nothing. Konoha was founded on the basis that we protect our own even in the hardest of times. But instead you turned your back on everything Hashirama and I believed in by gambling and immersing yourself in alcohol and raking up debts. And because of that, many deaths that could have been prevented had you the will to keep pushing forward are on your hands. Right now, I'm ashamed to call you my blood. Tobirama told her. The life of a ninja isn't easy. It never has been and never will be. If anything is to remain a constant aspect of a ninja's life, it's that. That's why only the true few can actually become one. We are meant to endure the bad times and find ways to cope with it. You lost your brother, your lover, and what remained of our clan, and I'm sorry for your loss. I truly am, Tsunade. But that doesn't excuse your actions, he said. Easy for you to say. You cheated death somehow. You're back. It's all well and fine for you. Nawaki, Dan, everyone else. They're all dead and they'll stay dead, and I'll never get to see them again. Never get to see Nawaki become Hokage like he wanted. Or see Dan becoming Hokage like he wanted, or marry him like I wanted. Both of them wanted to become fucking Hokage, and they both died a meaningless death, and their dreams died with them. Where were you? Tsunade shouted. Tobirama didn't even flinch. Don't ever doubt me when I say I would have been here for you had I been able to, Tsunade. Had I been able to, I'd have put my life on the line to ensure your brother lived, that your lover lived. I already gave my life up once, I'd gladly do it again without a second thought. Dear Tsunade scoffed, and that's the problem with being or wanting to be Hokage. You don't give a second thought. Hashirama Oji sacrificed himself to bring back all who died without a second thought, and it did nothing. You sacrificed yourself for your team without a second though. Neither of you thought of those you'd leave behind. And there's your father talking. Tsunade's eyes shifted from hurt to angry, but Tobirama didn't back down or even flinch. Hashirama and Mito's daughter, Senju Benton, had been a great ninja. Not as powerful as her parents, but Tobirama believed she had been well on her way to standing out as one of the best of her time. Until she met Tsunade's father. The man had come from a civilian background that had the immense luck of not being involved in much conflict or loss. Which to Tobirama meant he was ignorant of their ways and was not all for the harsh realities that came with it. It had been a flawed philosophy his niece had adopted. Strong as she was, Tobirama believed that Benton's greatest weakness to have been the love she held for her husband, and that made her blind at times. While Tobirama couldn't fault his niece for falling in love, she could have chosen a better partner instead of one that would end up being detrimental in Tobirama's opinion. Learning of his passing didn't bring him joy, but Tobirama wouldn't mourn him either. My father was an ignorant man. Both he, your mother, and Hashirama tried sheltering you from the harsh realities of being a ninja and spoiled you instead of teaching what it really means to be one. As a child you had the talent, you had the drive, you had the intellect, and I couldn't be prouder to know the next generation would be left in good hands. But it's clear to me I was wrong, for now I see that you lack the will and mental fortitude necessary to deal with the sacrifices and loss that comes with it. When I went to face Kinkaku Force, I knew the chances of me leaving alive were low, Tsunade. But I was prepared for it. I did everything I could to ensure my team and my village would be fine if did die. Anyone related to a ninja needs to be prepared for it. In Hirazen's hands, I knew you would go far. That's what being Hokage is about. That's what being a Senju is about. Ensuring that the next generation will carry on the will and fortitude taught to them. Something you lack. Something I lack. I lost count of the amount of people I saw die. People I failed to save. But I pushed on and buried it all for years until I just couldn't take it anymore, Tsunade retorted. I'm not talking about loss in general, Tsunade. Dealing with loss, dealing with death, you clearly know how to deal with them. But dealing with death and loss of a personal nature, you clearly don't. Dealing with death in general, varied from person to person, but dealing with the death of someone you were close to was much harder. I would be lying if I said the deaths of those closest to me was easy, Tsunade. But I found ways to cope. I didn't just give up. You did. You just gave up. Hiruzen told me how you didn't even try seeking help and denied it when it was offered. As soon as the war was over you just up and left without looking back. You left when countless others would have benefited from your skills and countless more would likely still be better off. She winced, but a part of her subconsciously agreed. Had she stayed and taught the next generation of medics, then in all likelihood things could have been different. It all stops now, Tsunade. The excessive drinking, the gambling, making a fool of yourself in the family name, all of it. It's either that, or you can walk out those gates without the clan name and the resources that come with it and be forever known as nothing more than a stain on the clan name. Or, you can get your affairs in order and do your duty to your village, to your clan, and be a part of something that will hopefully go down in history. Go down in history? Tsunade didn't recall that in the scroll. How? Simple. You can undertake the Senju clan's Vajra trials. Tsunade almost buckled and her heart threatened to burst from her chest. Fail, and you know what awaits you. The man didn't bother explaining what would happen if she succeeded. Tobirama didn't blame his niece for her current state. The Senju clan's Vajra trials came into being 1,000 years ago when the clan reached its first millennium. The trials were a symbolic series of secret tests known only the Senju clan, its exact origin long since forgotten. 4 trials represented the physical aspect of the ninja, 4 others the mental and the final 2 for the spiritual. They weren't to be taken lightly. Each set of trials were unique for those that undertook them, as such one simply couldn't tell where the next participant what to avoid. All in all, more than 95% of those who underwent the trials failed, and each of them had to be taken one after the other non-stop and without fail. And the trials only allowed you one chance. They were designed both as a means of improving oneself and as a form of punishment redemption for a clan member who committed a sin great enough to warrant its use. Hashirama had been the last Senju in over a century to have voluntarily undertaken it and successfully completed the trials. Tobirama had taken them too and had come close, but failed the last portion and almost died had Hashirama not intervened. Despite their different outcomes, the trials caused a powerful change in the 2 brothers that enabled them to make their mark in not only Senju clan history, but the ninja world itself. However, as you are now, I very much doubt your chances. So, you will start by helping us raise him. Beside Tobirama appeared a clone of himself with a sleeping babe in its arms. The man made his way over to Tsunade and plopped the baby in her arms much to her confusion. Kushina and Minato's boy, Tsunade recalled. Correct. That boy will be in your care from now on. You'll be his mother and protector. And when he's ready, you'll be his mentor and trainer. You will train him hard and you won't give any quarter, just as I did the same with Hiruzen. You will love him and die for him as I would. Do these 2 things right, prove yourself to me, and maybe one day you'll have my forgiveness, Tobirama informed. Tsunade winced mentally at the thought. Any student that survived her grandfather and granduncle's training methods generally became more skilled and competent than the average Jumnin at an accelerated rate. Tobirama OG. You don't get to argue with me on this, Tsunade, Tobirama stopped her. You either do this or like I said, you can walk out those gates. Do so and not only are you and I are done with each other. You're done with the Senju clan. Be grateful I'm even giving you this chance. Whatever your affairs are, have what I assume is your teammate hiding behind the wall take care of them for you. From his hiding spot, Jiraiya grunted, damn. How long has he known? Jiraiya was no slouch when it came to stealth and hiding his presence. The times he was happened when his lecherous leanings got the best of him. Only the exceptionally gifted and talented could sense him when he was serious, explains why Minato studied the man's sensory ninjutsu. Tsunade for her part and left with no other choice on the matter, as much as she didn't want to be here or do any of this, nodded her head. The Senju name was all she had left of her family. However, the woman couldn't help herself when she asked, what about that other woman? Beer Tobirama released an honest barking laugh, Toka. Toka is many things, Tsunade, but motherly and maternal she is not. She can fake it well, but that poses risks I'd rather not take. You on the other hand trump her in that department. Saru said you care for your apprentice as though she's your own daughter. Taking her in and raising her when her only remaining family had passed. No. For this the boy needs an honest-to-God loving mother. Tsunade was stunned by his answer, but at the same time it was also unfair. With Shizune, Tsunade had chosen to raise the girl as though she were her own. But this was a different set of circumstances. Shizune hadn't been a newborn when they both left Konoha, and Tsunade either raised the small whisker blonde in her arms or stopped. Oh, Aunt Tsunade. Get help and get over your fear of blood. You're no good to us as a medic otherwise, he ordered. She shivered lightly at the callous command but said nothing. Where will I be staying? She sincerely doubted Tobirama would allow her back in the head family building. Until you've earned it, you can use one of the guest houses. Her suspicions had been proven correct. We're done for now. Tsunade knew that was her uncle's way of saying leave me alone and no more questions, but the blonde-haired Senju couldn't help but ask him, how'd you do it? Sighing, Tobirama shook his head and gave her a look. However, the man decided to indulge her. Do what? Come back. How'd you do it? Tsunade asked him. Tobirama merely stared at her for a good while before he gave his answer. Even if I were to tell you, it wouldn't change a thing. Your brother, your lover, and those you lost over the years can't be brought back. Tobirama could use the Edo Tensei. But not only would such actions prove detrimental in the long run, and despite Tsunade needing to be taught a lesson, that was one of the few boundaries even he wouldn't cross. Like I said, we're done for the night, Tsunade. I'll summon you later to discuss what is going to be done. The woman got the hint and left with Naruto. While it only caused her to have more questions, Tsunade wasn't going to push her luck and began making her way towards one of the guest houses. Being even allowed access to one was a lucky break on her part, but Tsunade she was basically walking on thin ice standing over an abyss. One wrong move and she was fucked. Ah. Hearing the gurgling, Tsunade looked down and saw Naruto had half opened his eyes. From their brief opening, Tsunade saw that he had Minato's eyes. Much of what she saw Naruto had inherited from his father. Hopefully this doesn't mean you'll have Kushina's personality, she hoped and cooed him a bit. Watching them out of the corner of his eyes, Tobirama was satisfied to see his niece developing a bond with his war. It would make things easier down the line. Taking his gaze off them, Tobirama calmly stated, you can come out, sage. No sooner had he said that did Jiraiya appear before him in a puff of smoke. How'd you guess? Jiraiya asked the man. I sensed that your chakra echoed with remnants of natural energy, having been the brother of a sage, and having encountered and fought a few others in his lifetime, coupled with his gift in sensory ninjutsu, Tobirama had long since developed a way of detecting them. I'll be honest, that sounds as frightening as it is useful, Jiraiya told him. You have no idea, Tobirama agreed. We never managed to meet, but I've heard much about you. Do note that I won't take kindly to anything I deem unbefitting of a ninja around my ward whilst I'm around. Jiraiya heard the message loud and clear, but even that didn't stop him from saying, you know he's my godson, right? Verbally, yes, but not officially. Had he not been present for Tsunade's tongue lashing, the comment likely would have thrown Jiraiya off guard. Jiraiya, however, merely frowned at the moment. Great. An old school by the books kinda guy, Jiraiya didn't really care for those if he was being honest. In any case, you and I both know I won't be around much anyway, but I'll make sure to. You care for her, Tobirama suddenly said. Jiraiya blinked and this time he was cut off guard by the man's words. I'm very perceptive, Jiraiya. I sensed how your chakra and your heart fluctuated when I spoke to her. You care about her. Deeply. Perhaps to the point that you once contemplated something more and perhaps a part of you still does. Well, let me be clear, Jiraiya. I won't allow it. Jiraiya blinked once more. Whatever hopes or desires you may have for my niece, keep them to yourself. Right now, she needs to get her priorities straight. Her focus right now is Naruto and getting back into gear. The last thing she needs is someone with perverted tendencies that chases after every pretty face, to make her doubt she will ever be enough, to make her fall back into habits I'm trying to alleviate. I won't have it. Frowning, Jiraiya said, first off, Tsunade and I aren't gonna happen, I made peace with it a long time ago. Well, Jiraiya said that in a way that many would believe him. Tobirama doubted the man wholly believed he had ever gotten over his attraction to his niece. Was it love? Tobirama was uncertain. But Tsunade's life was already about to become complicated. As it was, adding a romance potentially doomed to fail and heartache was the last thing Tobirama needed to occur. And even if by some miracle it does happen, that's up to you to decide, Jiraiya finished. That's where you're wrong. I've seen your type many times, Jiraiya. How many times did you try and fail to get her attention? Dozens. Hundreds. How easy was it for her and Dan to end up together? You heard her, she truly even passionately wanted to marry him. You and Tsunade, you two are completely different people. And right now, she is vulnerable. And despite my disappointment in her, she is still my niece and I will protect her. From what I've learned, you are someone stuck in his ways. I should know, I'm the same. We say we can change. But we don't, not really, and eventually we fall back into our old patterns. From Danzo, Tobirama learned that Tsunade hadn't been the only woman Jiraiya had tried courting, but each one never lasted. Jiraiya's tendencies and preferences always playing a factor. Let me give you a piece of advice that may save you some heartache down the line. We don't all get to live the happy life we desire. Good guys don't always get the girl. And dreams don't always come true. Sometimes life gives us a role and we have to make the most of it and be happy with what we have despite it all. You and I, our roles in life is to make the lives of others better, to make their lives happier, not our own. Accept it and take solace in the fact you are taking away the burdens others don't have to face, Tobirama finished. Your real piece of work, Jiraiya couldn't help himself. How the man before him came from a clan that helped found Konoha's Will of Fire was befuddled the sage. Tobirama shrugged, I've been called much worse, some of which by his own brother. But, as I said, your relationship with my niece will remain a professional one. That of a friend she can count on. Or I'll see to it that you never come in contact with my ward. Godfather or not. Right now, a series of events have us on the verge of something monumental. We can't afford hiccups or allow our personal desires lead to a bad outcome. Series of events. Whatever Jiraiya was gonna say before left his mind by Tobirama's declaration. What are you talking about? The Kyuubi incident was no incident, Tobirama revealed, and glad that he was proficient in the use of sound barriers. Despite being floored by the reveal, Jiraiya's mind thought it through, you're saying it was by design. How? Who? And then Tobirama said two words Jiraiya would never forget, Uchiha Madara. What if Naruto is a prodigy like Tobirama? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.